Chapter 487. In the imperial study, Emperor Zhao Heng dismissed his two daughters expressionlessly after listening to their report. The two girls looked at each other in surprise. They did not expect their father to have no reaction at all. However, they did not dare to say anything. They had been married for a long time, and when they came back occasionally, they were actually trembling in fear when facing their father. Once they stepped out of the palace, it did not feel like a father and daughter meeting. Instead, it felt like the wife of an official meeting the emperor. The two girls bowed obediently and left. Zhao Heng picked up the memorial on the desk and opened it. Suddenly, he tilted his head slightly and asked, "Has Shi Wenguang's vanguard general Zhang Peng really been executed?" Beside him was a white-haired chief eunuch. He replied sternly, "It is difficult for the spies to break through Shi Wenguang's hidden sentries. Not many of them can return alive. However, it is true that Zhang Peng violated military discipline and was beheaded. I believe it is true. Shi Wenguang's army is very strict. He does not tolerate people who violate military discipline." Zhao Heng's expression was strange. He admired and hated Shi Wenguang. He admired him because he was a rare talent, but he hated him because such a general was not under his command but his enemy. Thinking of the 2 million-strong army occupying the western part of Huaxia, the 6 countries could not cross the border. If they made any moves, they would be attacked immediately. The gains did not make up for the losses. They had been at war for many years, even with the 6 countries working together to attack, but they still suffered under Shi Wenguang's hands. In a fit of anger, he mobilized millions of troops and divided the 6 countries. The 6 countries could not fight back. In the end, the 6 countries asked for peace with Huaxia. The rulers of the 6 countries were humiliated. One could imagine how depressed they were. The emperor of Huaxia is incompetent, but he has such a general under him. It is difficult for us to cross the line. We are going to lose our lives. Zhao Heng could not help but sigh. "Master, don't worry." The old eunuch said softly, "Didn't the higher-ups tell us to bear with it for now?" After the war between the cultivation world of various countries and the cultivation world of China was over, someone would naturally deal with Shi Wenguang secretly. From then on, the western part of Huaxia will no longer have such a brave general. The various countries will work together to divide the Huaxia Empire. From the fact that this old eunuch knew about the cultivation world, it was obvious that he was someone Zhao Heng trusted. It's a pity that he died. Talent was hard to come by. Unfortunately, I can't use it. Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Zhao Heng stared at the old eunuch and said, "Since the 3rd young lady is determined to die, don't let the 3rd young lady know that Zhang Peng has died. Let her continue to choose her husband." Understood. The old eunuch nodded slightly. Zhao Heng began to focus on the memorials. As he corrected them, he said, "This girl is so stubborn. She has been so devoted to a dead man for so many years. She begged me to hold a martial arts competition to find a prince consort for her. I thought she had thought it through, but I didn't expect her to actually want to find a capable prince consort to avenge the death of Chu Xiong. But that's fine too. I can use this opportunity to recruit talented generals and prepare for the future." "Master is wise," the old eunuch said. Zhao Heng turned his head and glared at him. "Keep an eye on them for me. Most of the royal relatives and nobles from other countries aren't doing well in their own countries. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to our country to be the emperor's son-in-law. Although they aren't doing well, the influence they have received since childhood is not something the children of ordinary families can compare with. Among them, there are many who are familiar with military strategies. There is only one daughter left, and only one prince consort. As long as the rest are talented, try your best to win them over. Let them stay and work for me. I am willing to give them high positions and generous salaries. Don't worry, master. I will arrange it properly." The old eunuch nodded. Then, there was silence in the imperial study. Today was the day of the martial arts competition to find a prince consort. The entire Dang city was very lively. The common people couldn't enter the palace to watch the competition, so they had to go to the streets to watch the participants pass by. Normally, only the participants could enter the palace. The rest of the attendants were limited. But because of Nongju, Wenrui personally went to the palace to look for the Mi brothers. Of course, the Mi brothers wouldn't care about this. They immediately found a few tokens to enter the palace and gave them to Wenrui. As soon as they went out, they saw a crowd. Nongju, Yu Qianqiu, Furong, and Zhang Peng squeezed into a carriage and joined the long queue of people from various countries. The soldiers had cleared the streets, so the journey was smooth. Nongju looked outside with a smile. She hadn't seen such a lively expression for a long time. Furong's face was also full of curiosity. She looked around. The most depressed one was Zhang Peng. After all, among them, he was the only one who was forced by his master to participate in the martial arts competition. The others were just watching the fun, but he was the one being watched. He couldn't be happy even if he wanted to. Yu Qianqiu lifted the curtain and looked at the two sides of the street. He kept shaking his head as he looked. There were many cultivators in the crowd. He couldn't tell who had a higher cultivation level, but there were many cultivators who were lower than him. He guessed that they were just here to watch the fun. Since it was like this, he might as well face it calmly. He looked at those cultivators with a provocative look. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, I can't avoid it. Today, I'll show my face to the world of cultivators from various countries. Who's afraid of who? Yu Qianqiu looked outside with a smile. From time to time, he raised his middle finger at the cultivators in the crowd. They didn't know what it meant anyway. Boy, what do you mean by raising your middle finger? Nongju couldn't help but ask. Yu Qianqiu replied with an "oh" and said disapprovingly, "It's nothing. It's a custom of Daang Kingdom. I'm greeting people on the street to show my respect. Hey! I've been here before. Why haven't I heard of it?" Nongju murmured and turned around. Without saying a word, she pointed her middle finger out of the window and shook it vigorously. His fingers were slender, and his middle finger was raised elegantly. No wonder he was Mr. Nongju. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched and he put down his hand. He couldn't associate himself with that guy. After entering the imperial city, everyone got off their horses and alighted. The gate of the imperial city was guarded by a large number of soldiers. It was impossible for ordinary people to get close. Those miscellaneous cultivators couldn't break in either. They couldn't enter without a token to enter the palace. There were some rules that even cultivators couldn't break. The Mi brothers had transferred a large number of people from the same sect from Mount Guangguang to guard around the imperial city. This was to prevent cultivators from breaking in. The guests from various countries entered the imperial city in a single file. The first thing they did was to pay their respects to the emperor of Daang Kingdom. Nongju, Wenrui, and the others naturally couldn't pay their respects to a secular emperor. Mi Russian was waiting in the imperial city. When he saw them, he immediately came to greet them and took them out for other arrangements. Only Zhang Peng was driven back by Yu Qianqiu and went through the process with the Wen family. Mi Russian carefully looked at Yu Qianqiu a few times, then led them to a sizable side hall. There were a few hundred chairs arranged in a circle. More than 10 people had already arrived. They were sitting peacefully and chatting with each other. They were probably cultivators sent by various countries to protect the royal family. Mi Russian came in and cupped his hands. "Everyone, Mr. Nongju and Mr. Wenrui are here." The group of people hurriedly stood up and saluted. Nongju raised his middle finger and said, "Do as you please. Don't be polite. I'm here to watch the fun." The group of people returned to their seats with doubts. They didn't know what Nongju meant by raising his middle finger, but judging from his expression, it should be a greeting. Everyone's eyes then fell on Yu Qianqiu and sized him up. Yu Qianqiu felt uncomfortable being stared at. He found that there were a few early-stage nascent soul cultivators, a few middle-stage nascent soul cultivators, and a few others whose cultivation he couldn't see. Then people came in one after another. The first thing they did was to greet Nongju and Wenrui. Nongzhu casually raised his middle finger, which stunned the people who greeted him. The second thing they did was to look at Yu Qianqiu, who was beside Nongzhu. After being stared at for a long time, Yu Qianqiu was a little numb. He simply entertained himself with Furong and pretended not to see anything. After waiting for a while, it was estimated that almost all the people had arrived. Hundreds of chairs were almost full. Between every 2 chairs, there was a small tea table with tea and snacks on it. There were more than a dozen disciples in the foundation building realm who kept shuttling back and forth, pouring tea and water for them. They were probably brought from the Guangzhou Peak. The atmosphere in the hall was a little quiet. Because of the presence of Nongzhu and Wenrui, the 2 cultivators in the Huashan realm, everyone was a little nervous. However, there were some bold ones who couldn't stand it anymore. They coughed, stood up and saluted Nongzhu, and said loudly, "Mr. Nongzhu, may I ask if the person sitting next to you is Yu Qianqiu?" Hundreds of bright eyes all stared at them. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile and nodded. "Yes, he is Yu Qianqiu. What can I do for you?" His tone seemed to be reminding something or wanting to see something interesting. Yu Qianqiu immediately looked at that person. He was squarish, tall and strong. From his appearance, he indeed had the talent to stand out. "Silly bird. I am Ding Wei, a cultivator in the late nascent soul stage. I heard that Yu Qianqiu claimed to be the best cultivator in the world below the Huashan realm. Is that true?" Ding Wei asked respectfully. Yes, I heard it with my own ears," Nongzhu pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, "I can prove that he did say that." Not only did Yu Qianqiu feel uncomfortable hearing this, even when Roy looked at Nongzhu with some surprise. Back at Bai Wan's embassy, he risked everything to protect Yu Qianqiu. How could he be suspected of selling him out now? Nongzhu continued to chat with Ding Wei with a teasing tone. The topic was getting more and more sensitive. Only their hearty voices could be heard in the hall. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and looked around. Everyone was staring at him. Coupled with Nongzhu's ambiguous attitude, it would be hard for him to have a good time today. He sat next to Wenrui and rubbed his nose with his palm. He tilted his head and asked softly, "Senior Wenrui, apart from the 2 of you, are there any other cultivators in the Huashan realm? What are their cultivations like?" Wenrui was stunned. He looked at Ding Wei and scanned everyone present. Then, he replied telepathically, "Apart from me and Mr. Nongzhu, there are no cultivators in the Huashan realm. There are 9 in the early stage of the tribulation passing. The rest are all below the tribulation passing stage." "What do you want?" "That's good to hear." Yu Qianqiu muttered softly. Under Wenrui's surprised gaze, he coughed and stood up. Chapter 488. Nongzhu and him were separated by Wenrui. They sat in the middle, followed by Nongzhu, Wenrui, Yu Qianqiu, Furong, and Wenbai. Even though he spoke softly, Nongzhu could not hear him. In fact, many people heard him. "Everyone says this kid is good at stirring up trouble. Before I leave, I want to see how he does it." Nongzhu glanced at him with a smile, leaned back, and did not speak. Everyone's eyes were focused on him. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and said, "Ding Wei? Brother Ding? Have we met before?" "No, this is my first time." Ding Wei also cupped his fists. "Oh. I see that Brother Ding keeps mentioning my name. Is there something you want to talk to me about?" Yu Qianqiu smiled. Ding Wei snorted, "I'm not the only one looking for you. Based on what you said, cultivators from every country want to find you. Let's see if you have the ability to call yourself the number 1 cultivator below the soul-forming stage." He then looked around and shouted, "Everyone, am I right?" "That's right. You're a mere nascent soul cultivator, how dare you call yourself number 1? With someone taking the lead and Yu Qianqiu standing up as well, the group of people immediately began to sway from their seats and jeered. Some even stood up and pointed their fingers at him as they berated him. Furong immediately became nervous. She had never seen such a scene before. Yu Qianqiu stuck his pinky into his ear and blew on it. Then, he slowly looked at the crowd and said indifferently, "Don't get too excited, everyone. I was just joking. I didn't even take it seriously, but you all took it seriously. It's unbelievable." The crowd suddenly became quiet. Nongju laughed dryly, but she forced herself not to make a sound. No wonder he was a soul-forming stage cultivator. Ding Wei, who stood up, was stunned for a while. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he said angrily, "Joking? How dare you joke about the reputation of the cultivators in the world? What do you think the cultivators in the world are? Brother Ding, don't you think you're putting too much on us? It's not as serious as you say, right?" Yu Qianqiu shrugged. Hua. The sound of chairs moving rang out. Almost everyone stood up and pointed at Yu Qianqiu as they questioned him sternly. "Little brat, that's nonsense." With so many curses mixed together, it was almost impossible to hear them clearly. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He had never been cursed by so many people at once. From everyone's extreme reactions, it could be seen that the situation was indeed as serious as Ding Wei had said. There was a hint of a common enemy. Did these guys eat rat poison? Is it worth it? It was a pity that he wasn't Stephen Chow, who could scold a whole bunch of people by himself. Otherwise, he could really fight it out. Therefore, Yu Qianqiu frowned coldly at the thousands of fingers pointing at him. He was unfazed by the praise and humiliation. He planned to settle old scores with everyone after they were done scolding him. At first, Nongju looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. This brat was usually sharp-tongued, but now he knew what it meant to have the public's mouth melt gold. She had lived for more than 1,000 years and had never seen a person being scolded by so many people at once. However, after listening for a while, Nongju couldn't laugh anymore. It was a mess, and she didn't know how long it would last. It was simply annoying. He immediately let out a cold snort that reverberated in the hall. The curses of the group of people finally stopped. Yu Qianqiu really had to give it to these people. They were like shrews cursing in the streets. In fact, he should have a deeper understanding of what it meant to anger the public. If Nongju and Wenrui were not sitting here, he reckoned that a group of people would have rushed up and beaten him up. Everyone. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and looked around. "I am deeply aware of my mistake. Because of my momentary slip of the tongue, I have hurt the feelings of the majority of the cultivators in the cultivation world. Here, I solemnly express my sincerest apology to everyone. I hope that you can spread my words and resolve this misunderstanding as soon as possible. I hope that we can bury the hatchet and build a better tomorrow for the cultivation world hand in hand. Thank you, everyone." His words were sincere, and so was his attitude. Unfortunately, he didn't get the applause that Yu Qianqiu had expected. This speech was fresh, and everyone needed some time to digest it. There was a short silence in the hall again. The innocent Furong was the first to come to her senses. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with admiration. It turned out that words could be said in such a dignified way. Nongju frowned and exchanged a look with Wenrui. She muttered, "What nonsense are they talking about?" Someone came to his senses and cursed, "Damn it. You are from the cultivation world of Huaxia. You are not on the same side as us. Who wants to build a better tomorrow for the cultivation world hand in hand with you?" There was a lot of cursing, but the voices were much softer. Thanks to Nongju's cold snort, they had calmed down a lot. Ding Wei shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, you have to pay the price for saying something wrong. How can you just apologize? If you do that, do we still need to fight and kill in the cultivation world? Damn it. This seems to be the line I used before." Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. He said indifferently, "I have let you scold me, and I have apologized. What else do you want?" Everyone was stunned. They really didn't know what to do with him. Everyone looked at Nongju. They all knew that Nongju was Yu Qianqiu's protection. If they angered him, no one present would have a good ending. Nongju smiled and drew circles on the tea table with her slender fingers. She smiled at Wenrui and said, "We will not interfere with the younger generation's business." He didn't even look at Yu Qianqiu, whose face was as cold as ice. Wen Rui glanced at him and was startled. He nodded slightly, indicating that he would not interfere with the younger generation's business. The two soul-forming cultivators said that they would not interfere. Everyone was emboldened. Ding Wei shouted, "If you are really the strongest cultivator below the soul-forming stage, then show me what you are capable of. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave. You want to fight?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. Ding Wei didn't want to waste time. He stretched out his hand and said, "I will fight you first. You are the strongest cultivator below the soul-forming stage." The meaning behind his words was clear. He wanted to fight. "You think you're worthy?" Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, "I think you're tired of living, right?" The crowd was in an uproar. This guy obviously didn't take Ding Wei seriously. Ding Wei was so angry that he laughed and said, "Whether I am worthy or not is not a matter of words. Only after we fight will we know who is tired of living. Please." The hall was surrounded by the crowd. The space left in the middle was only a few square meters. If they were to fight, they really didn't know if it would be enough for two people to fight. "I don't want to fight." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "If you want to fight, then I'll fight. Who do you think I am?" He sat back in his seat as if it was none of his business. Nongzhu was stunned. This didn't seem like the Yu Qianqiu she heard about. "What do you mean by the strongest cultivator below the soul-forming stage? I think he's just a cowardly rat hiding his head and tail," Ding Wei cursed to his heart's content. The crowd immediately started to condemn him again. Their words were almost the same as Ding Wei's. Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly and slowly stood up. He reached out and pointed at Ding Wei and said, "You like to scold me? Once I make a move, I'm afraid you won't even have the chance to cry when you fall." He then pointed at the crowd and said disdainfully, "You are just a bunch of trash. Do you think you are worthy to bare your fangs and brandish your claws at me?" Nongzhu looked at him suspiciously. This guy's words were so soft and hard today. What was he trying to do? The extremely slanderous words made the crowd feel like they had eaten gunpowder. After sitting down for a while, they all jumped up again. Someone even shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, come and fight me if you have the guts." A 3-feet-long blue flying knife flew out of Ding Wei's storage bag. He raised it high and was ready to fight first. Yu Qianqiu pushed his hand and said, "Wait. I knew you were a coward who only put up a strong front." Ding Wei sneered. "You want to fight? No problem. But I don't do things that I don't have anything better to do." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the crowd in disdain. He took out a storage bag and threw it on the tea table between him and Wenrui. He pointed at it and said, "There are 1,000,000 upper-grade spirit stones in there. If anyone beats me or kills me, this 1,000,000 upper-grade spirit stones will belong to him." Nongzhu was stunned. Was there something wrong with this kid's brain? He said he didn't do things that he didn't have anything better to do. The crowd was also stunned. Was there such a good thing? Then, everyone nodded in understanding. This kid was probably feeling guilty and wanted to use the situation to make people think that he was confident and was just trying to scare them. Haha. Ding Wei laughed wildly. "Everyone, I'm sorry. Who told me to come out first? This 1,000,000 high-grade spirit stones is mine. What are you laughing at?" Yu Qianqiu immediately poured cold water on them. "This is a gamble of money and life. Anyone who wants to fight me and earn 1,000,000 spirit stones must first take out 1,000,000 high-grade spirit stones as a wager. If you don't have money, don't embarrass yourself. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Let the rich fight. I'll fight you anytime." Ding Wei's arrogant smile froze on his face. The crowd was also stunned. The people here were not poor, but they did not have high positions in their sections. There were not many who could carry 1,000,000 high-grade spirit stones with them. Nongzhu was suddenly enlightened. It turned out that this guy admitted defeat first to make everyone think that he was afraid of them. When a group of people unscrupulously criticized him, he ridiculed them so that they had no choice but to avenge their humiliation. Then he threw out a huge bet. This group of people was in a difficult position. Nongju squinted at everyone's expressions. Most people thought that Yu Qianqiu was bullying them because they did not have money. He wanted to scare them with a huge wager to avoid a fight. What they didn't know was that this kid wanted to kill people to earn money. He wanted to kill two birds with one stone. It seemed that Ze was right. Whatever this kid did, it was mostly related to money. Ding Wei, if you don't have money, get someone else to come up. Don't just stand there. Yu Qianqiu sneered. Ding Wei said angrily, I came in a hurry. Where do I have so many spirit stones to bet with you? You are clearly scared and purposely used money to make things difficult for others. TSK. If you really want to fight me, that is not a problem at all. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Mi Russian, who was standing at the side with his hands behind his back. This old thing was standing there calmly and did not say anything. How could he let Hua Zhongming's people watch? He raised his finger and said, It is normal that the guests did not bring money at the last minute. But I think the owner of this place wants to gather some spirit stones in his territory. If you really want to prove that you are not trash, you can borrow some from the owner. I think the owner is not so stingy. Chapter 489. Everyone looked at Mi Russian, not knowing what he would say. Mi Russian was shocked. He had been standing on the side and had not said a word. How did he get involved? Borrow money to fight? Ding Wei was dumbfounded. Everyone fell into silence again. Nongju was overjoyed. This brat was really vengeful. He had his eyes on Hua Zhongming and would not let him go if he had the chance. How did Bai Changchun get such a precious disciple? I told you, you are a bunch of trash. Yu Qianqiu looked around and said, Gambling without borrowing money is fake. You have no confidence in yourself. If you really have the confidence to defeat me, are you afraid of not being able to pay me back? What a joke. No wonder people say that dogs that bark don't bite, and dogs that bite don't bark. It is indeed true. Today, I present these words to all of you, and I hope that all of you will kindly accept them. How dare you? How arrogant. The group was angered by these words. He actually called them dogs. Ding Wei's face turned red as he said, Yu Qianqiu, why are you the one making the rules? Today has nothing to do with money. I'm going to fight you to the death. He wasn't going to take out any money to fight Yu Qianqiu head on. Wait. Yu Qianqiu pushed his hand away and said to Mi Russian in a deep voice, This is the territory of your light illumination peak. No matter what, I'm a guest. Now that someone wants to attack me, is your light illumination peak really going to ignore it? We're all guests, so how can you favor one over the other? Is this how your light illumination peak treats its guests? With this accusation on him, Mi Russian knew he had to speak up. After all, he was the owner of this place. There were some rules that no one could break. He teleported between the two of them and said lightly, We are all guests. We can talk things over. Since Mi Russian had already come out to stop them, Ding Wei naturally did not dare to be presumptuous in front of this cultivator in the last phase of Heaven's test. He put away the blue flying knife in his hand, pointed at Ding Wei and shouted, Yu Qianqiu, you are so shameless. You said you would fight, but now you are cowering. Are you still a man? Yu Qianqiu was too lazy to pay attention to him. He cupped his hands to Mi Russian and said, High Priest, you have seen what happened, now I need you to come and uphold justice. Nongju smiled and said nothing. He wanted to see how this guy would end up talking nonsense. How do you want me to uphold justice? Mi Russian said expressionlessly. Although they have the advantage in numbers, I'm not someone who's afraid of trouble. But if they take turns, and I fight one after the other, won't I have to fight more than 300 rounds? Even if I win every round, I'll be exhausted to death. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, I admit that I increased the bet to reduce the pressure and eliminate those who can't afford it. Do you think it's too much for me to make a small request against more than 300 people, High Priest? Mi Russian was not in a hurry to answer. He asked the crowd, "Do you think Yu Qianzhou's request is too much?" No matter how thick-skinned they were, when they heard this, it was 1 to 300. Who would have the nerve to say the word too much? In the silence, Mi Russian nodded to Yu Qianzhou and said, "No one objected. Your request is too much. Is this the justice you want me to uphold?" "The justice I want you to uphold is very simple." Yu Qianzhou pointed to the storage bag on the tea table and said, "Gambling with your life and money. If you can afford 1 million upper-level spiritual stones, I will play with you anytime. If someone can't afford it and still wants to pick a fight, then please uphold justice, High Priest." He glanced at Ding Wei, as if saying that Ding Wei was the one who couldn't afford it and still wanted to pick a fight. Ding Wei's face turned red in anger. He gritted his teeth but couldn't do anything. Mi Russian was still expressionless. He asked the crowd, "Do you all agree that I will uphold justice?" After waiting for a while, no one spoke. He nodded and said, "Since no one objects, then I will accept it. You all do as you wish." Then he teleported back to his original position. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand at Ding Wei with disdain and said, "If you don't have the money, then leave. Don't stop other people from getting rich." When he said, "other people," it wasn't clear if he was talking about others or himself. If Ding Wei left obediently like this, he wouldn't be able to come out in the future. He would be laughed at to death. He had indeed reached the point where he couldn't back down. Making up his mind, he gritted his teeth and strode towards Mi Russian and said, "High Priest, can you temporarily lend me 1 million upper-level spiritual stones? If I win, I will return it immediately. If I lose, my sect will not renege on this debt." When he said this, his face was full of shame and anger. Only by killing Yu Qianzhou would he be able to wash away his shame. Yu Qianzhou scratched his nose and said in a strange tone, "When borrowing money, first ask clearly if there is interest, in case there is trouble afterwards. Don't look at me, I am reminding you out of goodwill." Ding Wei fiercely turned his head away. It was as if he had swallowed a fly. Logically, who would mention interest when borrowing spirit stones like this? Mi Russian didn't rely on lending spirit stones to earn interest to survive. But since someone reminded him, how could he be thick-skinned and pretend he didn't know? He gritted his teeth and said, "High Priest, about the interest." Mi Russian waved his hand to stop him from continuing. If he really asked for Ding Wei's interest in front of so many people, then he would really offend his sect. He said indifferently, "There is no interest." He already took out a storage ring and threw it over. "Thank you, High Priest." Ding Wei took the storage ring and thanked him. He turned around and strode over, holding the storage ring, and yelled, "Yu Qianzhou, let's see what else you have to say now." "Of course I have something to say." Yu Qianzhou shrugged and said, "The bet should be given to a person of virtue and prestige that we both trust. It can't be given to you or me." "Humph." Ding Wei snorted and didn't say anything. Obviously, he agreed with this. The two of them looked at the two soul-forming cultivators at the same time. When it came to virtue and prestige, no one here could compare to the two of them. When Nongzhu heard this, he rubbed his hands and laughed. "If that's the case, then I will reluctantly do it." They were masters in the middle stage of soul-forming. Of course they wouldn't stain their spirit stones. Ding Wei didn't say anything and was about to hand over the storage ring to Nongzhu. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianzhou shouted, "Wait, I am a little worried about handing the spirit stones to Mr. Nongzhu. It's better to give it to Senior Wenrui." Everyone was stunned. Nongzhu was his umbrella. He didn't trust Nongzhu but Wenrui? Ding Wei was about to go crazy from being tormented by this person. He didn't know if he should hand over the storage bag in his hand or not. Nongzhu also reached out his hand, but he didn't know whether to take it or not. He stared at Yu Qianzhou angrily. How dare he embarrass him in front of so many people? There was no need to explain. Yu Qianzhou just didn't trust Nongzhu. Now that the money was in Nongzhu's hands, others might be able to get it back, but it would be difficult for him. Especially his proactive response, it made people even more suspicious. Yu Qianzhou pushed the storage ring to Wenrui and said, "Senior Wenrui, please take care of it for now. If I lose or something happens to me, Give this storage ring to the person who defeats me. Wen Rui glanced at Nongju, who was leaning on the chair with her eyes closed. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He put the storage ring on the tea table. With his cultivation, if Nongju didn't insist on coming, who would come to join in the fun? People in the soul-forming stage were usually heard but not seen. It was even more impossible for them to work for others. Ding Wei awkwardly took back the storage ring and didn't dare to look at Nongju again. He pushed the storage ring to Wen Rui and said the same thing as Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu dared to say that he didn't trust Nongju. Ding Wei didn't dare to say that he didn't trust Wen Rui, so he gave the storage ring to Wen Rui for safekeeping. Please. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand gently. It was about to begin. Everyone was instantly refreshed. Even Nongju opened her eyes, forgetting about the temporary unhappiness. Yu Qianqiu. Furong suddenly stood up, the worry in her eyes was obvious. Yu Qianqiu frowned slightly and glared at her. Furong sat back down in embarrassment. Ding Wei stepped back and was instantly refreshed. Finally, he could avenge his humiliation. He looked at the young couple and laughed. Yu Qianqiu, if you have any last words, tell your woman. I'll give you the time. The surrounding people also laughed along with him. Yu Qianqiu had just put on a smiling face for Furong. When he heard this, he slowly turned around. There was no expression on his face. He asked calmly, how do you want to die? Ding Wei snorted and nodded, you're about to die and you still dare to talk big. The blue flying knife once again flew above his head. Yu Qianqiu spread out his sleeves and a dozen green lights flashed out, circling around his body. Everyone present stared at the green flying swords with twinkling eyes. They had heard that Yu Qianqiu could control multiple flying swords at the same time, but this was the first time they had seen it. Out of everyone present, only Nongju knew that these flying swords were formed from green flames. The flying swords danced around him as Yu Qianqiu walked towards Ding Wei expressionlessly. He said indifferently, if I say you're trash, then you're trash. I'll let you make the first move. I want to see who's the trash. Ding Wei roared angrily, and the blue saber above his head began to spin faster and faster. One saber became two became 4, until it became 8, and then it stopped increasing. Yu Qianqiu was slightly surprised. He didn't know if it was an illusion or if the blue knife was also a treasure. Swoosh swoosh. The 8 rapidly spinning blue knives were like 8 blue plates. With a swoosh sound, they suddenly spread out. Yu Qianqiu looked to his left and right. The blue revolving flying daggers had already surrounded him from all directions and were rapidly approaching him. F***CK. This thing might be useful to scare others, but you want to play this game with me? Let's see who's surrounded. Yu Qianqiu activated his sword art. The protective flying sword immediately split into 8 green lights. They quickly clashed with the 8 flying knives, making a series of metal clanging sounds. Then, he waved his sleeves. Hundreds of green lights instantly flew out from his sleeves and scattered around the hall, dazzling everyone's eyes. By the time the flying sword stopped spinning, everyone realized that Ding Wei was already surrounded by hundreds of flying swords. Chapter 490. It's over. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. Ding Wei himself was scared out of his wits. He had never experienced the feeling of being surrounded by so many flying swords. The fight had just begun and it had already become like this. What was the point of fighting? 8 spinning blue flying daggers quickly flew back from the gaps between the densely packed flying swords. They danced around his body, trying to protect him. However, the 8 flying knives could only protect a limited area. No matter how fast they were, it would be difficult to block the simultaneous attack of hundreds of flying swords. There had to be a loophole. Thus, without saying anything, he released his shield of vigor. Yu Qianqiu stared at him with a look of disdain. The flying swords were ready to attack, but they did not attack. It was as if they were waiting for him to prepare his defense. It was clear that he had a card up his sleeve. Everyone sighed inwardly. Ding Wei was probably doomed. Furong patted her chest lightly. She could also see that her man was going to win. Nongzhu did not say anything. He had expected this to happen. If he could not even deal with a nascent soul cultivator, then Yu Qianzhou did not deserve to be the disciple of the world's most powerful cultivator. I really don't understand. There are people in the tribulation stage here. They don't come out, so why did you, a nascent soul cultivator, come out? Aren't you taking your life as a joke? Can you tell me why? Yu Qianzhou asked with a puzzled expression. Ding Wei shouted angrily, Yu Qianzhou, don't put on airs here. It's not certain who will win. The 8 blue flying knives spun faster and faster, moving quickly outside the shield of vigor. Killing you is as easy as taking something out of my pocket. How can these broken knives stop me? Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes and said, but I'll give you a chance to live. Do you want it? Now the atmosphere was finally not as lively as before. Only the swishing sound of the blue knives could be heard. Everyone listened attentively, waiting for Ding Wei's answer. Ding Wei did not answer immediately. Obviously, he was a little moved by Yu Qianzhou's words, but he could not show weakness. He immediately shouted, if you have something to say, say it. Don't be so wishy-washy. There's always a price to pay for doing something wrong. Pointing 2 fingers at the ground, Yu Qianzhou sneered, admit that you're trash, kneel and beg for mercy, and I'll spare your life. Hua. The audience was in an uproar. This guy was too arrogant. However, Ding Wei, who was surrounded by flying swords, did not make a sound. As there were too many flying swords, no one could see his expression clearly. Everyone looked at each other. Would Ding Wei really agree to this? They didn't know that Ding Wei was trembling in anger and couldn't even speak. The other party was clearly humiliating him in public. This was also Yu Qianzhou's revenge on the bird who provoked him first. Why aren't you talking? Yu Qianzhou chuckled and said, it doesn't matter if you die, but it's a pity that you'll leave a huge debt for the sect after you die. Fortunately, the head priest doesn't want you to pay interest. Yu Qianzhou, go to hell. Ding Wei finally let out an angry roar. 8 blue swords whistled as they swept over in an arc. Yu Qianzhou flicked his finger and dozens of flying swords flew out, immediately entangling the blue swords. With a cold expression, he said, I have to admit, if you met other nascent soul stage cultivators, your 8 blue swords would indeed pose a great threat to them, making it hard for them to take care of everything. Unfortunately, you met me, and I only have 8 blue swords. With that said, he waved his sleeves and a black shadow flashed out, shooting into the encirclement of swords. Everyone had yet to figure out what was going on. Ah! A mournful scream suddenly rang out. The 8 blue swords suddenly fell to the ground powerlessly. Before they landed, they reformed into one and fell to the ground with a ding-dang. Everyone was shocked, but they saw Yu Qianzhou wave his hand lightly, retrieving the black shadow that shot out. The swords instantly surged violently. A cloud of red mist began to spread, and the thick smell of blood began to fill the entire hall. After hundreds of blue flying swords continuously flashed back into Yu Qianzhou's sleeves, Ding Wei had already disappeared. Everyone immediately understood that Ding Wei had already been turned into dust by the flying swords. This thick smell of blood was. Everyone waved their hands and stirred, forcing the disgusting blood mist out of the hall. Yu Qianzhou picked up the blue swords on the ground and looked at them, then casually threw them into his storage bag. When everyone looked at him again, their hearts were a little cold. What a powerful sword art! Yu Qianzhou walked in front of Wen Rui and smiled, I won, this spirit stone is mine. Wen Rui didn't say a word, nor did he express any attitude. Whoever won could come and take it themselves. As a dignified soul formation expert, how could he really help these people do this? His role was to make sure that no one dared to snatch things from him. He picked up the 2 storage bags and showed them to everyone. Is there anyone who is unconvinced? Bring out the money. Gambling with money and life, I will continue to play with you. He returned to his seat, hugged the storage bags, and counted the spirit stones as he continued, if you don't have money, you can borrow from the head elder. In his territory, don't mention 2 million, even 1 or 200 million is no problem. Hurry up, don't miss out. Russian stared at him indifferently. The group of people no longer said he was talking nonsense. They looked at each other, and finally looked at the few tribulation-passing early-stage cultivators. Unfortunately, no one jumped out like Ding Wei. Yu Qianqiu put away one of the storage bags and glanced at everyone. He thought, anyway, don't think about being free. Rather than waiting for you to find me, I might as well find you. From today onwards, I will go all out. If I don't turn this place upside down, I won't be called Yu Qianqiu. I said you are trash, but you are still unconvinced. Shouting is useless. If you have the guts, show me your actions. Yu Qianqiu put the storage bag he earned back on the coffee table next to Wen Rui and pointed at it. If you have the guts, bring out the money to gamble. If you don't have the guts, take a detour when you see me. Don't bark like a dog. What the hell is this? Wow. Everyone was finally enraged and stood up one by one. Nongzhu looked at him in shock and thought, this guy is crazy. Does he want to go against the entire cultivation world by saying this? However, this was not the craziest thing. Yu Qianqiu also stood up and pointed at the crowd. His face was filled with disdain as he said, don't be unconvinced. I can't be bothered to fight you all one by one. As long as you have the money, it doesn't matter if you all come at me together. I will take you all on alone. Wen Rui and Nongzhu looked at each other as if they were asking Nongzhu who this guy was. He was too arrogant. Everyone here represented a faction. Wouldn't that be offending all the countries? Would he still want to live in the future? Nongzhu shook her head with a wry smile. Furome's mouth turned into a circle. Although she did not know where these people came from, she was still shocked by Yu Qianqiu's words. As soon as he finished speaking, 3 people flashed out from the crowd almost at the same time. The 3 of them looked at each other in shock. Obviously, they did not expect such a coincidence. It seemed like they were really going to fight 3 against 1. For a moment, they were stunned and felt a little embarrassed. It's okay, it's okay. I have always been a man of my word. My words are like water that has been spilled. Let's fight together. Yu Qianqiu's bellicose nature was completely stimulated. For a moment, he was full of fighting spirit and was ready to test the hard work he had put in all these years. To be honest, ever since he defeated 2 cultivators at the end of the passing calamity stage, he had long looked down on ordinary cultivators. Fighting someone like Ding Wei was not satisfying at all. However, he did not get too excited. He pointed at the storage bag on the coffee table and said, put down 1 million upper-level spirit stones. Those who don't have spirit stones can go back. Since he had said so, who would be polite with him? After seeing Yu Qianqiu fight, the 3 of them were not confident that they could defeat him. However, as cultivators at the passing calamity stage, if they did not stand up for him, they would not be able to raise their heads when they went back. They had no choice but to come out. Now, it was exactly what the 3 of them wanted. A person in a blue robe walked over. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed slightly. This outfit was very familiar. Sure enough, the person said in a deep voice, Shishui country's early passing calamity stage cultivator, Yan Feng, seeks advice. Then, he bowed to the 2 soul formation stage cultivators, took out a storage bag and placed it beside Wen Rui. Tuan country's early passing calamity stage cultivator, Wu Yankai seeks advice. A black-robed person also put down a storage bag. West Asian country's early passing calamity stage cultivator, Yuan Tonghai seeks advice. A gray-robed person also put down a storage bag like the previous 2. The 3 passing calamity stage cultivators attacked together. This time, it was enough to make that kid suffer. The crowd cheered loudly. They all stood up and clamored, hoping that the 3 of them would make Yu Qianqiu die a horrible death. It seems that there are still a few rich people. Yu Qianqiu stood up in high spirits, thinking that he could fight to his heart's content. Suddenly, a figure flashed in the middle of the group. Mi Russian said expressionlessly, "Don't fight first. This is the Daeong country's palace. It can't withstand your torment. Let's go somewhere else. Follow me." After saying that, he took the lead and flashed out of the hall, flying into the sky. The few of them looked at each other, grabbed their own storage bags, and followed. Before Yu Qianqiu left, he said to Furong and followed Senior Nongzhu. The group of people dispersed, flashed out of the hall, and flew away like a swarm. In the blink of an eye, only Nongzhu, Wenrui, Wenbai, and Furong were left in the hall. There were also a dozen disciples from Guangguang Peak who were at a loss. Wenrui asked Nongzhu, "What should we do?" Nongzhu rubbed her hands and said with a smile, "This kid doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He must have taken a strong medicine today. Let's go and take a look." After saying that, she grabbed Furong's hand and flew away. Wenrui shook his head with a bitter smile and waved at Wenbai. The two of them also followed. The hall suddenly became empty. The tables and chairs were in a mess. The remaining Foundation establishment disciples looked at each other. The ordinary people in the palace didn't notice, but some cultivators noticed the group of people flying away. They didn't know what happened. On the various stages, the competition had already begun. Zhang Peng, who had just won a match with a few punches and kicks, also noticed the group of cultivators flying away. He wanted to follow them, but his master didn't allow him to. He could only hold back his anger and continue to compete with the ordinary people. Chapter 491. A group of cultivators suddenly flew out of the palace and headed west, immediately alerting all the cultivators in Daeong City who had gathered here. One by one, they found a remote corner and quickly chased after them, out of the sight of mortals. After everyone arrived, they realized that Mi Russian really knew how to find a place. This place was the flat land formed by Yin Baikong's raging attack on 6 mountain peaks. This place was remote and deep in the mountains, making it difficult for mortals to enter. Moreover, the place was wide and flat enough, at least a few thousand square meters. Although Yu Qianqiu had heard of Yin Baikong's mountain building movement from Wenrui and Nongzhu, he was still shocked when he saw it with his own eyes. Oh my! This expert in the late stage of soul formation was really something. Not to mention creating the world. He still had the ability to collapse the mountains and split the earth. Originally, there were only about 300 cultivators from the palace. Now that cultivators from Daeong City came to make up the number had increased by almost 10 times, almost 3,000 people. Their cultivation levels were high and low. There were many in the Foundation establishment stage, and it seemed that there were also many in the late stage of tribulation passing. This remote mountain suddenly became bustling with noise and excitement. The cultivators from Daeong City didn't know about it, so they found their acquaintances from the palace. After asking about the cause of the matter, they were all furious. In an instant, there was a wave of angry voices scolding Yu Qianqiu in the remote mountain. "Scold slowly. I won't lose a piece of flesh." Yu Qianqiu still looked as if he was facing thousands of fingers. When faced with such a situation, the best choice was to not speak. Previously, he couldn't even win against 300 people. Now, there was no need to even mention it when it was 1 against 3,000. Therefore, he let them scold. That was the best choice. Nongzhu looked around happily, clicking her tongue non-stop. What a spectacular scene. He was being scolded by 3,000 people at the same time. When he returned, he must tell Bai Changchun about this unique scene and let him know that the disciple of the world's #1 expert was indeed extraordinary. Presumably, old Bai would turn pale with fright. Hibiscus looked at her surroundings. It was as if she was a small boat in the middle of a raging storm. The huge waves around her could come crashing over at any time and swallow Yu Qianqiu in one gulp. He then looked at the sneering Yu Qianqiu. His expression was filled with disdain. There was not a hint of panic or fear on his face. She suddenly had an epiphany. This man's life must have been filled with danger and excitement. He must have been used to ups and downs. Compared to her peaceful life on Fuxian Island, it was completely different. With the two soul formation stage experts holding the fort, although the scolding got louder and louder, it didn't cause any trouble. Several hundred square meters of space gradually emptied out. There were only 4 people left in the center: Yu Qianqiu, Yan Feng, Wu Yankai, and Yuan Tonghai. A trace of fierceness flashed across Yu Qianqiu's face. He swung his hand and threw the storage pouch at the feet of Wen Rui and Nomzhu. The person standing in the middle was none other than Furong. Immediately after, the other 3 people also threw their storage pouches over. People kept shouting, "Beat him to death, kill him." Yu Qianqiu looked around and took out 2 items from the storage pouch with both hands. 2 black machetes that were almost 2 meters long appeared again. They were held in his left and right hands and were very eye-catching. Once the 2 machetes were taken out, the scolding stopped and everyone started whispering to each other. The topic of discussion was the saber-drawing assembly that they had heard of. These 2 machetes should be the 2 legendary treasured machetes. They didn't expect this guy to be carrying them with him all this time. In an instant, all kinds of greedy expressions appeared in many people's eyes. Just like when Yu Qianqiu killed Ding Wei. When Ding Wei died, his blue flying knife was picked up by Yu Qianqiu. No one said anything. If anyone could kill Yu Qianqiu, then his 2 treasured machetes. Yan Feng's eyes narrowed. He heard that Yan Feng, who went to China, died under these machetes. The other 2 people looked at the machetes with burning eyes. It was a pity that there were only 2 machetes. It was destined that one of them wouldn't be able to get it. Yan Feng slowly took out an iron-colored whip that was rolled up together. Yu Qianqiu glanced at it. It seemed like the Shishui country's rumor sect was most proficient in using whips. Back then, the senior and junior brothers with the surname Yan who died in the 100 Flowers Valley used whips. It seemed like this person's whip wasn't as long as the other 3's, but it looked much longer. Wu Yankai used a flying sword. Yuan Tonghai used a bow and arrows. It was a blood-red longbow, and even the bowstring was red. It was unknown what it was made of. A quiver was slung on his back, and the arrows inside were also blood-red. Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised. There were people who used bows and arrows as artifacts. What if the arrows in the quiver ran out? Now, he really felt the difference between the cultivation world of various countries and the cultivation world of China. The latter almost all used flying swords, while the former used all kinds of strange weapons. The 4 people he met today all had different weapons. Luckily, I can wield a machete too. Mi Russian saw that they were in position and said expressionlessly, "We'll start here. Everyone, let's begin." The moment he said that, Yan Feng and the other 2 dodged and surrounded Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu waved his 2 machetes and shouted, "Watch out for my machete." He quickly chased after Yan Feng. He had fought with people from Rumor Sect in the 100 Flowers Valley and was experienced in dealing with people who used whips. As for the others, they didn't know what was going on. Yan Feng waved his hand and a whip that was tens of meters long coiled around the charging Yu Qianqiu. It seemed like he wanted to trap Yu Qianqiu. Chop! Yu Qianqiu shouted and slashed with his machete. Suddenly, a whistling sound came from behind him. It sounded very imposing and powerful. He didn't even need to look to know that one of the other 2 had made a move. He didn't have time to deal with the whip. Without a second word, he quickly dodged to the side. Using the opportunity to flip in midair, he saw that it was Wu Yankai's flying sword. Cultivators cultivated flying swords because they were easier to control than most weapons. Furthermore, they were very nimble. Indeed, the moment Yu Qianqiu dodged, the flying sword turned and shot over without stopping. At the same time, Yan Feng's whip also whistled over. Yu Qianqiu was still in midair when he saw Yuan Tonghai pulling out 3 arrows from the quiver on his back. He knocked them all and shot them out. The 3 arrows shot out at the same time, leaving a trail of blood in the air as they crossed each other. Damn! The arrow was even curved. Yu Qianqiu shouted again, "Watch out for my treasured saber." Before he landed on the ground, he used the saber in his right hand to meet the incoming whip. At the same time, he used the saber in his left hand to cut it. Dang! Pooh! 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 The long whip that was circling over broke into 5 or 6 pieces. Yan Feng was startled and did not dare to send out the remaining whip. At the same time, Wu Yankai felt a heartache. His flying sword was also broken into 2 by the saber. It fell to the ground and became 2 pieces of scrap metal. It couldn't fly anymore. There was an uproar outside the arena. These 2 treasured sabers were too sharp. They cut the sword and the whip like they were cutting tofu. Weapons that could be used by cultivators in the Tribulation Realm weren't the Dharma artifacts of ordinary cultivators. Moreover, the weapons in the hands of these 3 people were indeed Dharma treasures. Instantly, everyone stared at the 2 treasured sabers with even more fervor. This was because they had verified that they were indeed rare treasures. Yu Qianqiu wasn't in the mood to care about what the people outside the arena thought. He still had to deal with the 3 incoming arrows. The saber was big enough. Once he landed on the ground, he put the 2 sabers together and used them as a shield. Dang, dang, dang. Although the flying sword blocked the arrows, Yu Qianqiu slid more than 10 meters away from the impact. A straight line immediately appeared on the soft ground. Nongzhu shook her head slightly. This was the difference in cultivation. It was a flaw that couldn't be made up for. Yu Qianqiu's arms were numb from the impact. He almost let go of the 2 sabers. However, the 3 arrows that were also sent flying spun in the air and fell straight back into the quiver on Yuan Tonghai's back. Damn it! What kind of lousy arrows are they? They can go home by themselves. Yu Qianqiu shook his arm and rushed towards Yan Feng again. Who asked Yan Ji to threaten me? If I don't kill you first, who else can I kill? This time, he learned his lesson. A flying sword flew out from his sleeve. When he jumped up, the flying sword immediately carried him and rushed towards Yan Ji. Why do you keep staring at me? Wu Yankai doesn't have anything in his hands, and you don't want to go. Yan Feng was speechless. He casually swung his broken whip and stabbed it straight towards Yu Qianqiu like a javelin. Wu Yankai and Yuan Tonghai naturally wouldn't leave Yan Feng alone. They couldn't let Yu Qianqiu deal with one and then turn around to deal with them. Wu Yankai took out another flying sword from his storage bag. Although it wasn't as good as the previous one, it was still useful. Yuan Tonghai grabbed an arrow and knocked it. Nobody knew how he used it, but 7 or 8 blood shadow lines shot out. Go to hell! Yu Qianqiu roared and threw the 2 treasured sabers into his storage bag. He realized that although the treasured sabers were easy to use, they weren't very practical. He had to rush up and slash. It was fine to use them against people with similar cultivation, but it was more suitable for sneak attacks against people with higher cultivation. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to get close to them. He kept the sabers and flew up into the sky on his sword, avoiding the 3's attacks. Wu Yankai and the other 2 nodded at each other and quickly shot up into the sky, chasing after them. The surrounding spectators immediately cheered. Furong clasped her hands together nervously. Nongzhu glanced at her and said, "Don't worry. This brat has many trump cards. He hasn't used any of them yet. He won't die." Wen Rui tilted his head and looked. He didn't expect Nongzhu to be so confident in Yu Qianqiu. Just in time. Yu Qianqiu stopped in the air and sneered. I was afraid that the 3 of you would scatter too far and I wouldn't be able to catch up. It's best if you come together. He turned around and dove down. His sleeves swelled up and an endless stream of green shadows flashed out. In an instant, thousands of flying swords appeared, covering the sky and covering the earth as they flew towards the 3 people below. The momentum of the thunderous sword rain made the surrounding people dumbfounded. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, who would believe that someone could actually control thousands of swords at the same time? So many flying swords. The 3 people who were chasing after them were dumbfounded at first. Then, they were scared out of their wits. They realized that they had fallen into a trap. They hurriedly stopped and split up without saying a word, fleeing in panic. However, with their cultivation, their flying speed wasn't fast enough to outrun the flying swords. Moreover, they were lured by Yu Qianqiu and then attacked so suddenly. How could they escape so easily? Chapter 492. The sudden turn of events stunned the people who had been cheering loudly just now. Yu Qianqiu put his palms together in front of his chest and controlled the thousands of flying swords to chase in 3 different directions. Qing Yaoyao's sword shadows rushed forward and quickly caught up to the 3. In the face of danger, the 3 released their protective aura at the same time and temporarily blocked the flying swords' attack. The flying swords in the air formed 3 green thorny balls. Yu Qianqiu glanced at them and opened his palms. 3 black shadows shot out and directly entered the flying swords that formed the balls. Ah! 3 screams sounded in the air. The people below thought, "It's over." Yu Qianqiu waved his arms and the thousands of flying swords rushed back into his sleeves. 3 flying swords carried 3 storage bags and sent them to him. For cultivators who could casually take out 1,000,000, the items in their storage bags would probably not be too bad, so he naturally had to accept them. The 3 corpses fell from the sky. This place was newly excavated, so the soil was very soft. The 3 corpses smashed out half a deep pit and were embedded in the ground. This time, he didn't destroy the corpses. He wanted to intimidate everyone and tell everyone that 3 early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators had been killed by him. In the future, those nascent soul cultivators shouldn't bark in front of me. Furong covered her mouth in shock. The man who grew spirit herbs with her in Wanfan Garden had actually become so powerful. In the blink of an eye, he killed 3 early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators. The grand scene of the thousands of flying swords shocked her even more. He was as mighty as a god. The flying swords flew straight down. Once they landed, the flying swords bounced up and went into his sleeves. Everyone's eyes stared at his sleeves. There were so many flying swords inside. Could it be that there were 2 storage bags tied inside? Yu Qianqiu picked up the storage bags at Furong's feet. After putting them away, he strode back to the center of the field and said loudly, "Who else is unconvinced? I still stand by my words. Those who can take out the money can come and compete with me. There's no limit to the number of people." As he said this, he waved his hand and pointed in a half circle. "If you can afford it, it's fine if you all come at me together." Then he pointed at me Russian and said, "Those who are capable but don't have the money, you can find Great Minister Me to solve the problem. He has already borrowed money once before, I believe he won't favor one over another and look down on others." Me Russian stared coldly at him. Even though he did not say anything, the faint murderous intent around him could be felt by the people standing nearby. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and sneered. "Now that I've revealed my 2 treasured sabers, I don't believe that no one will covet them. I want to see how much money your illumination peak has to lend out. I want to see if you'll lend it out or not." It's not easy to offend people. Especially if he offended a lot of people. At the same time, it would be a headache if one family did not return the money, but if everyone did not return the money together, it would be infuriating. The people around them were whispering to each other. Yu Qianqiu waited for a while and shouted, "Is there no one here? If no one comes, then I'll leave." As he spoke, he began to walk back. "Wait!" Almost a dozen people shouted at the same time. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and saw a group of people discussing something. Then they all nodded. Oh my! More than 50 people walked out together. The leader pointed at him and said, "Yu Qianqiu, you said it yourself that it's fine if you all come at me together. I have 58 people here, do you dare to accept the challenge? Damn it! Is there someone in the soul transformation stage hiding here?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at this group of people and then felt relieved. With Nongzhu here, it was impossible that she would not say anything even if she saw someone in the soul transformation stage. Although Nongzhu always contradicted him, she would not act recklessly on some major issues. Even if she did not give face to him, she would give face to her master. I, Yu Qianqiu, am famous in the Huaxia cultivation world for being a man of my words. What I say is like spilled water, I can't take it back. You can doubt anything, but don't doubt my credibility. Yu Qianzhou patted his chest loudly and said, of course, no matter how many of you come, I can't miss a piece of spirit stones. 58 people, 58 million upper-level spirit stones. If you miss a piece, I won't accompany you. The group of people looked at each other, nodded and walked to Mi Russian together. Before they could speak, Mi Russian's usually calm face was already twitching. He didn't need to ask to guess the intentions of these people, to borrow spirit stones. Sure enough, the group of people bowed in unison. The leader cupped his hands and said, High Priest, we only have about 8 million upper-grade spirit stones on us. We hope that High Priest can lend us 50 million upper-grade spirit stones. We will definitely return it to you. His tone was very firm, as if it was not difficult to return the money. They probably thought that this time they had more people, they would definitely win. Once Yu Qianzhou heard this, it would be lively if everyone cooperated to borrow money. Once this kind of money was lent out, if there were 1 or 2 people who did not acknowledge the debt, then the money could not be recovered. Everyone would definitely push the blame to each other. Unless everyone was self-conscious. But this kind of hope was very slim. When it came to the matter of returning the money, everyone would first shrink back and wait to see if the other party would return the money. If the other party did return the money, then it would be fine. It seemed that the chain reaction of waiting and watching was to wait and see. If the other party did not return the money, why should I return the money? In Yu Qianzhou's previous life, when he had just started out in the business world, he had helped people collect their debts. Many bosses had encountered such a group of scoundrels, and after going through all sorts of trouble, they still couldn't collect their money. That was why they would look for people like him to forcibly collect their debts. Similar things were common, so Yu Qianzhou was happy. Mi Russian frowned slightly, as if he also felt that something was wrong. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Yu Qianzhou shout loudly, since you want to borrow money, can you be more sincere? Bow. Bow more deeply, don't make it seem like they have to lend you money. If it were me, I would only say one thing, I don't have that much money with me, and I won't lend it to you. More than 50 people looked back at the same time, and the leader snorted coldly, this is our business, you don't need to worry about it. Haha. I am a dog catching mice, meddling in other people's business, you guys continue. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said cheerfully. Nongzhu, who was quite familiar with his character, couldn't help but laugh. This guy was too bad, he just wouldn't let go of Hua Zongming's people. At that time, she was afraid that if she couldn't get the money back, it would be equivalent to throwing it away for nothing. Even if she could get the money back, it would cause complaints from the other families, and they would blame him for lending money to these people to die. Nongzhu didn't think that these people would definitely be able to take advantage of Yu Qianzhou just because they had the advantage in numbers. From the faintly discernible murderous aura between this guy's eyebrows, it could be seen that this guy seemed to have made up his mind to start a massacre. Perhaps he was determined to make things big today. Sigh. It seemed that those old things had forced this guy to do something desperate. This guy was going to use force. Mi Russian looked at Yu Qianzhou, and a hint of fierceness flashed across his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. He really wanted to say something like that to tactfully refuse, but Yu Qianzhou exposed his secret in advance, and immediately fell into an impasse. There was a trap in front and behind him, even if he borrowed it, it would still be a trap. If he didn't borrow it, he would fall right into the trap just now, and he didn't know what this group of people would think. It's not that I don't want to lend it, but I don't have many spiritual stones on me, only about 3 million left, how can I take out 50 million? Moreover, I've never carried so many spiritual stones on me before. You can't expect me to go back to Guangguang Peak to get it now, can you? He then took out a storage bag, and handed it to them, if it can help you, then take it. The 50 people looked at each other, not knowing whether to take it or not, and immediately began to discuss with each other. Damn it. Old people really aren't vegetarians, they're like a lizard cutting off its tail to survive, sacrificing the pawn to save the rook. Yu Qianzhou silently cursed, after Mi Russian did this, no one else would ask to borrow from him in the future. The group still borrowed the 3 million, and then everyone began to shake out their storage bags, gathering spiritual stones there. A group of cultivators with decent cultivation. For the money for a fight, they actually needed more than 50 people to come together. In the imperial sky Queen Earth, the mountain wind blew gently, under the gaze of thousands of people. The 58 people, including the old and the strong, all dug into their storage bags. That scene made many people's hearts ache. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a while. Even he himself felt that he couldn't watch it anymore. If he continued to watch, he might not be able to kill them later. Of the original 58 people, 47 left under Yu Qianqiu's dumbfounded expression, and the remaining 11 seemed to be the ones with the highest cultivation. It seemed that they felt that they had a better chance of winning the fight. Nongzhu's voice immediately sounded in Yu Qianqiu's ears. Among these 11 people, 6 are at the early stage of passing calamity, and the rest are at the late stage of gathering vitality. Be careful, kid. The leader, carrying a storage bag, walked to Wenrui respectfully, bowed, and then put the storage bag at Wenrui's feet, then turned around and walked back. Wenrui suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. The scene of gathering spiritual stones was really a bit sad. He suddenly felt that he was one of the main culprits. He turned around and took a look at Nongzhu, but the latter was blinking her eyes and trying to hold back her laughter. After that person returned to his original position, he waved his hand at Yu Qianqiu, who was in a daze, and shouted, "Where's your 1 million upper spiritual stones?" Oh. Yu Qianqiu came to his senses, trotted to Wenrui, squatted on the ground, took out a storage bag, put down his own, and picked up the one that was put by the person just now. When that person saw this, he was about to open his mouth to ask what he was doing, but found that this guy squatted on the ground and seemed to be counting the spiritual stones in the storage bag. The person opened his mouth to say something, but he swallowed it back. It was not wrong for Wenrui to check whether there were fewer spiritual stones in the storage bag. What could he say? If he went to check, Yu Qianqiu would also have nothing to say. He is also a person with a master's background. He will not leave you out in public. Wenrui really could not stand it anymore, and could not help but say, "That's not necessarily true. The more famous a family is, the more they like to do despicable and shameless things. 8 million is not a small number." When Yu Qianqiu said this, he also finished counting the spiritual stones, nodded and said, "That's a good number." Nongzhu could not help but ridicule, "Kid, aren't you a little too explicit? Don't you feel ashamed?" Yu Qianqiu replied with a look that said it's none of your business, then immediately waved to the 11 people and said, "Let's start." Then he took out a flying sword from his sleeve, stepped on it, and flew straight to the sky, this time flying very high. Chapter 493. Wenrui looked at Nongzhu in confusion. It was incredible that a cultivator in the Yuanying realm dared to be rude to a cultivator in the middle stage of Huashan realm again and again. The strangest thing was that Nongzhu didn't seem to take it seriously. Especially when Yu Qianqiu was facing Hu Zongming and the others, it seemed that he didn't care about a group of cultivators in the Huashan realm at all. Yu Qianqiu's background made Wenrui deeply suspicious, and this was not the first time. The 11 cultivators quickly took out their weapons and chased up into the sky. However, as soon as they reached midair, they spread out into a circle and surrounded him as they chased after him. Obviously, after seeing what happened to the 3 people in front of them, they were afraid of Yu Qianqiu's thunderous sword rain, so they didn't dare to chase him directly. Instead, they scattered and surrounded him. The wind blew the clouds. Yu Qianqiu stopped in the sky and stared at the people who were chasing him. He said to himself, "Kind people will be bullied, and kind horses will be ridden. If I don't scare you today, I'm afraid that in the future, everyone will want to fight with me. Who can deal with them? It seems that my master's method of frightening the demon realm is worth learning. I should use thunderous methods to frighten ghosts and monsters. Kill." He grabbed 2 yellow talismans in his hands and threw them out. A series of explosions sounded in the sky, and thick smoke rolled and spread, covering Yu Qianqiu. He used the smoke talisman. The 11 people who were chasing him stopped and didn't dare to move forward rashly. After a while, the wind in the sky became stronger, and the spreading smoke gradually dispersed. Yu Qianzhou's figure appeared again in the sky on his sword. The 11 people looked at each other from afar. They didn't know what was going on, but they didn't dare to act recklessly. They didn't know what tricks Yu Qianzhou was playing. The thousands of people who were watching the battle looked at each other and didn't understand what Yu Qianzhou meant. Nongzhu pinched her chin and frowned. What tricks is he playing now? Yu Qianzhou, who was in the air, stared blankly at the dispersing smoke for a while. Then, he muttered to himself with an awkward expression, "Damn, how could I forget that the wind is too strong at high altitudes?" Originally, he wanted to set up a smoke screen in the air and then use his advantage of being able to control 1,000 swords to launch a sneak attack. Who knew that as soon as the smoke screen appeared, it would be blown away by the strong wind at high altitudes? Even he had fooled himself, let alone others. Unless it was a roundworm in his stomach, no one would be able to guess what he was playing at. Yu Qianzhou glanced at the 11 people who were biding their time. "What are you guys so nervous about?" At this moment, a white cloud came along with the wind and covered his figure once again. When the white cloud floated past, Yu Qianzhou revealed a look of realization. He patted his forehead and casually took out 2 smoke talismans. After a series of explosions, the smoke spread again in an instant and enveloped him. Others could not see what was happening inside, but he opened his arms in the smoke, and thick white fog gushed out from his body. Everyone found that after the smoke was blown away by the wind again, a white cloud appeared in the sky. The white cloud surged and expanded continuously. Gradually, it spread nearly a kilometer in the air before stopping. To everyone's surprise, all the surrounding white clouds were drifting with the wind, but this one was the only one that stayed in the air. Such a strange thing, everyone knew without guessing that it was Yu Qianzhou's doing. Even Nongzhu, who was below, looked up and was stunned. She said, "Is there anything that this guy can't do? He can actually make clouds?" Last time, the miraculous method of making flowers and trees wither with the passage of time had already made him feel that it was incredible. Now that he had played with something new, it was an eye-opener for him. It was not difficult to evaporate water into mist, but the difficult part was to turn the mist into a cloud and not disperse. Hibiscus opened her small mouth in surprise. This man was like the sea, hiding many unknown things that needed time to slowly uncover. Yu Qianzhou hid in the clouds and chuckled. Just now, using the smoke to create a diversion was really unnecessary. It was the white cloud that floated past him that reminded him. White clouds were formed by water. He could control the water art, and he could also create clouds and rain. It was not difficult to make a cloud. Hence, he created a pile of it. There was another advantage to the clouds that he created, and that was because it was formed by his water art. It was not something that could be dispersed by the wind. It was completely under his control. Yu Qianzhou opened his arms in the clouds and found a little of the feeling of being an immortal. Every tiny drop of water that formed this cloud seemed to be a part of his body. He knew every movement in every place like the back of his hand. In this sea of clouds, he was the master. Nothing could escape his eyes. This feeling was too wonderful. Master was right. Indeed, the one who uses it well is invincible. Yu Qianzhou clicked his tongue in admiration. He knew that because of this unintentional action, he would have another method to deal with his enemies in the future. In the future, whether it was to investigate the enemy's situation or when escaping, turning water into mist would be a very good method of concealment. Ha! Yu Qianzhou's savage laughter came from the clouds. A bunch of trash, come at me. He was insulting them in public. The expressions of the 11 people changed. After waiting for a while, the leader scolded them for being cowards. Then, he shouted to the others, "Let's work together and disperse this cloud. Let's see where he can hide then." The 11 people cautiously approached the edge of the cloud. They were probably still a little afraid that the lightning sword rain would suddenly emerge from the cloud. Yu Qianzhou closed his eyes and felt the movement in this space. After waiting for a while, they didn't discover any strange movements. The 11 people took out all kinds of weapons and madly stirred the cloud. However, no matter how many changes you stirred or how many thousands of strands you pulled out, it would slowly float back. It was impossible to disperse it. Someone was so angry that he released his flying sword into the cloud and shot it randomly. With someone taking the lead, everyone else took out their own weapons and madly attacked the cloud. Yu Qianqiu crossed his arms in front of his chest. With a smile on his face, he stepped on the sword and didn't even bother to open his eyes. He leisurely dodged the attacks. This was his world. In this world, no matter how fast your flying sword was, where it came from, where it was going, and where it was moving, it would all appear clearly in his mind. As long as he dodged in advance, he would be able to evade it effortlessly. The 11 people madly attacked for a long time, but they didn't hear any reaction from inside. However, they didn't dare to go deep into the cloud. No one wanted to face the scene of thousands of swords. The leader shouted angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, if you have the guts, come out and fight openly. You're a pig brain. You have the nerve to say that you want to fight openly when 11 of you are fighting me alone." Yu Qianqiu's sneer came from inside. Everyone listened to the sound and determined the location. They took out their mystic tools and attacked the place where the sound came from. As a result, their mystic tools collided with each other. A series of rumbling noises came from inside, shaking the cloud. After recalling their mystic tools, Yu Qianqiu sneered again, "A bunch of cowardly rats." The voice came from another location. The 11 of them attacked at the same time, but once again, they missed. So Yu Qianqiu kept mocking him. The 11 people took turns to attack, but every time they missed, Yu Qianqiu's voice would change to another place and continue to sneer. After a while, someone suddenly shouted, "Everyone, release your divine sense and search. Let's see where he can run to." Everyone cheered and did as they said. Yu Qianqiu secretly sneered after hearing that. He finally reacted. "I'm waiting." With a flick of his sleeves, hundreds of black shadows drilled into the sea of clouds. Once the 11 people's divine sense entered the sea of clouds, they couldn't help but think that it was a close shave. There was a black flying sword hanging in the air every few days. No wonder this guy hid inside and refused to come out. As everyone expected, he wanted to lure everyone in for a sneak attack. But the strange thing was, when everyone released their mystic tools to attack, why didn't they touch these flying swords? Everyone used their divine sense to check these black flying swords, but they didn't find anything special. Their divine sense continued to spread inside. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes to feel the movements of the 11 divine senses in the clouds. When they were deep inside, his eyes suddenly opened. The hundreds of flying swords instantly released the power of the black fire and shot towards the 11 divine senses. Actually, he understood the power of the black fire. Otherwise, it wouldn't have become the mystical fire that separated the yin and yang realms. Ever since he got it, he had been suppressing its use and never abused it. Because he knew that the trump card was to be used as a trump card. He couldn't always take it out to show off. Otherwise, it wouldn't have the miraculous effect of killing. Unless it was a critical moment, he would never take it out and use it openly. Occasionally, he would use it for a while. Ah! In an instant, the sky was filled with cries of grief. That kind of unforgettable, soul-burning pain was unbearable for anyone. The sound was so miserable that even the people below had goosebumps when they heard it. The people who were watching the battle with their heads raised were shocked by the screams. They saw the cloud in the sky suddenly expand and engulf the 11 people in an instant. Soon, the screams disappeared without a trace. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They all knew that the 11 people were probably finished. What puzzled everyone was that those people were still fine outside the cloud, so why did they suddenly curl up into a ball and let out such miserable wails? What the hell happened? Yu Qianqiu stood quietly in the cloud. The 11 twisted corpses had been turned into beehives by the flying swords. The flying sword stabbed the corpses in front of him and cut off the storage pouches hanging from the waist of the 11 corpses. He raised his palm and hundreds of flying swords drilled out of the corpses and returned to his sleeve. Losing their support, the 11 corpses fell from the clouds with a whoosh. Yu Qianqiu watched them leave. He put his palms together and chanted, Amitabha. I really didn't want you to reveal my secret. So I killed you. Excellent, excellent. The people below saw the 11 figures fall quickly. Pa. They were embedded in the soft ground. There were already 14 corpses on the ground. The group of people looked at each other silently. Chapter 494. Although Furong had been cultivating for many years, it was the first time she saw someone kill someone. Moreover, it was Yu Qianqiu who shared the same bed with her. He killed one person in the imperial palace, and now he killed 14 people here. Especially those shrill screams just now, it made her hands and feet feel a little numb. Nongzhu noticed her abnormality. From her eyes, which were as pure as her own daughter's, she saw a frightened expression. She frowned slightly and thought to herself, I don't know where Yu Qianqiu kidnapped this girl from. It seems that she has never seen the world. How can he take her to walk in this kind of environment? No wonder that guy asked me to bring her back. Ouch. A long howl came from the 9th heaven, which attracted everyone's attention. They saw Yu Qianqiu jump out of the white clouds, riding on his flying sword and descending rapidly. As soon as he came out, the big cloud began to fluctuate. It was wrinkled by the wind, changed shape, and slowly drifted away. The flying sword fell rapidly from the sky. When it was close to the ground, it suddenly drew an arc and threw its head up. Yu Qianqiu jumped up in the air, somersaulted a few times, and landed steadily on the ground. The flying sword made a cyan arc and went into his sleeve with a swoosh. Yu Qianqiu strode to Wen Rui's feet and picked up the 2 storage bags in front of everyone's eyes. Then he walked back to the field with the bags in his hand. He glanced around coldly, raised the storage bags in his hand, and shouted with unyielding fighting spirit, who else is not convinced? Yu Qianqiu will fight with you anytime. The crowd moved and whispered to each other. Although they were indignant, no one dared to act rashly after witnessing the fate of more than 10 people. Especially the 47 people who retreated before, they secretly thought that they were lucky to escape. The original infant stage people in the crowd all looked at the crossing calamity stage people. No one answered. Yu Qianqiu raised the storage bags and shouted again, where are the people who shouted before? Who else is not convinced? Yu Qianqiu will fight with you anytime. Young man, you've already killed so many people. Why are you still so overbearing? A voice rang out, and a commotion broke out among the crowd in the south, opening up a path. An old man in a homespun long gown walked out. He first bowed to Nongzhu and Wen Rui, and then walked to the opposite of Yu Qianqiu. He had a few strands of mustache and was neither fat nor thin. His complexion was rosy and his eyes were shining brightly. He had the appearance of a Taoist master. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly, you only see me being aggressive, but have you ever seen others being aggressive towards me? My original intention was to travel around the various countries without any other intentions. Who would have thought that Huazongming, Yan Ji, and the other deity-severing experts would force me into a corner, forcing me to say such a big lie? He pointed at the crowd and continued in a stern voice, in the imperial palace, more than 300 cultivators from various countries forced me to fight. Now that I've suffered a loss, it's me being aggressive. What kind of logic is this? The old man stroked his mustache and said indifferently, I don't care about what happened before, but you've earned enough fame. You'd better stop and leave this place. Go back to your huaxia cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu looked him up and down, then laughed wildly, who do you think you are? Yan Ji said he wouldn't let me leave alive. Do you dare to deny Yan Ji's words? Then I'd like to ask, what's your cultivation level? Can it be higher than Yan Ji's? If your cultivation level is higher than Yan Ji's and you can let me leave safely, I'll listen to you. As soon as he finished speaking, Nongzhu's voice sounded in his ears, young man, restrain yourself. This person is called Shu Dingfang. You can't afford to offend him. He's a disciple of Hu Changshu, a deity-severing late-stage cultivator who is as famous as Yin Bai Kong. His cultivation level has already reached the late stage of tribulation. Damn it. Why didn't you say so earlier? Don't you know that I hate people who take advantage of their seniority? I've already said it, how can I take it back? Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and looked at Nongzhu, who was smiling slyly. He cursed in his heart, this bastard is doing this on purpose. However, he was calm in his heart. He didn't plan to go back halfway. How could he be scared off by someone so easily? Moreover, his master's reputation was much higher than his master's. It wasn't like he couldn't beat him, so why should he be afraid of him? It didn't make sense. Chu Dingfang's expression was uncertain. His cultivation level was indeed not as high as Yan Ji's, but with his background, if he wanted to send Yu Qianqiu out, Yan Ji wouldn't dare to do anything to him. The key was that Yu Qianqiu had said this. If he made a decision now, it would be the same as going against Yan Ji. The power of Yan Ji, Hua Zongming, and the others was not small. When the time came, his master would probably punish him in order to save Yan Ji's face. He would take it as an explanation to Yan Ji. Chu Dingfang immediately became angry from embarrassment. He changed the topic and said, I heard that you claim to be the most powerful cultivator below the soul formation stage. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the 14 bodies on the ground. He said proudly, for now, that is the truth. I heard that any cultivator below the soul formation stage can fight with you if he can take out 1,000,000 top-grade spirit stones. Chu Dingfang's tone was aggressive. Yu Qianqiu sneered and didn't say anything. He took a storage bag with 11 million top-grade spirit stones and threw another one to Wen Rui. He was telling Wen Rui to do whatever he wanted with his actions. Chu Dingfang took out a storage bag with cold eyes and threw it to Wen Rui without turning his head. Nongzhu looked at the storage bag on the ground and calculated. This guy had killed 15 people, which was equivalent to 15 million top-grade spirit stones. If this job was done well, even a spirit stone mine with a high output would not be able to mine so many spirit stones in a year, right? Nongzhu looked at the storage bag on Chu Dingfang's waist and her eyes lit up. If this guy could get that storage bag, he would make a fortune today. You asked for it. Don't blame anyone else. Chu Dingfang said indifferently. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. Nongzhu's pupils shrank and her heart skipped a beat. There was a huge difference between the early stage and the late stage of the tribulation stage. Teleportation. Yu Qianqiu was greatly alarmed, but he reacted quickly. At the same time that the other party disappeared, he leaped up without a care for anything else. Ah! With a roar, he opened his arms and a fierce blue fire burst out at a speed that could devour everything. It was to defend against the attack from an unknown direction. The exploding blue fire made people around exclaim. It was the first time for them to see someone who could contain so many flames in his body. Moreover, they were blue flames. The majestic and unparalleled heat waves rushed around in an instant. Those with low cultivation could not resist it at all and fled in panic. Nongzhu did not say anything. She pointed out a light ball and wrapped hibiscus in it. She couldn't let Yu Qianqiu be distracted now. Wen Rui also released a light ball to protect Wen Bai. Just as Yu Qianqiu leaped into the air, Chu Dingfang suddenly appeared just a step away from where he had been standing. She waved her palm and wanted to slap him, but she realized that she had hit nothing but air. Chu Dingfang looked up and suddenly saw a wave of hot and crazy blue flame pressing down on her face. She was shocked. The protective upstanding chi rushed out quickly. However, the terrible temperature that came with it kept pressing through the transparent protective upstanding chi, wave after wave higher than the previous one. Chu Dingfang was shocked. Now it was not a question of whether to fight back or not, but to get out of this frighteningly hot sea of fire first. He had never seen a flame that he could not resist for a while with his cultivation. The spherical protective upstanding chi wrapped around him and quickly slid away from the ground, leaving a deep ditch on the spot. As soon as he got out of the raging blue flame sea, he heard a roar coming from the monstrous flames, watch my blade. Chu Dingfang abruptly turned her head and saw Yu Qianzhou chasing out of the raging flames on a green flying sword. He was holding a large black saber in both hands, and his face was full of anger. He jumped up from the flying sword like a god of death and slashed at Chu Dingfang's protective aura. So fierce. Everyone was deeply shocked by the incomparable scene of Yu Qianzhou rushing out of the sea of fire. Two words emerged in their minds: fierce and unafraid of death. Furong's eyes were full of shock. This scene was too shocking for someone like her, who was psychologically close to a weak woman. Wen Bai, who had been dissatisfied with Yu Qianzhou deceiving him, at this moment, had no resentment at all. Just the momentum of his appearance was undeniable. Generally, even a Yuanying late-stage cultivator could only run away when he saw a Yuanying late-stage cultivator. But this guy actually turned around and chased after a Yuanying late-stage cultivator with a broadsword. He rushed up and slashed at them. Nongzhu, on the other hand, was beaming with joy. She kept clicking her tongue, hiss. The big black broadsword slashed down, and the protective upstanding chi was like a thin piece of paper. Chu Dingfang was scared out of his wits. The blade almost brushed past the tip of his nose. This broadsword was a little too long. He thought that his protective upstanding chi could completely block this broadsword, and he could take Yu Qianzhou's life with a backhand. He was just waiting for Yu Qianzhou to pounce on him. Who knew that this would be the result? The most terrifying thing was that he was clearly burning just now, but when the broadsword broke through, he immediately felt like he was thrown into an ice cave. There was also the heart-palpitating aura that came head-on, as if he had instantly arrived at hell on earth. Little did he know that Yu Qianzhou was also very regretful. If he had been a little more courageous just now and pounced forward a little more, he might have been able to chop this old bastard alive with this broadsword. However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. But it still gave him courage, and he waved his broadsword and roared, "Meeting on a narrow path, the brave one wins." His voice was loud enough to shake the surroundings, as if he was afraid that people did not know how brave he was. Chu Dingfang was shocked for a moment and frantically dodged, not knowing how to quickly teleport away. Yu Qianzhou chased after him, raising his broadsword with both hands and slashing wildly. That unstoppable spirit caused Chu Dingfang to be in danger again and again. In fact, Chu Dingfang was confused by the aura on the broadsword, and could not react for a moment. Behind Yu Qianzhou, there was a surging green sea of fire chasing after him. In the sea of fire, there were also some green, faintly discernible flying swords flashing in and out. In addition, Yu Qianzhou was holding a 2-meter-long big black broadsword that was taller than him, chasing after Chu Dingfang and slashing wildly. The fighting scene was enough to make everyone dumbfounded. Damn it! You asked for it. Yu Qianzhou himself did not know why Chu Dingfang was so easy to bully now, so he ignored it for the time being. Relying on the fierceness of the fire, the size of the broadsword, and the boldness, he raised his broadsword and chased after and slashed wildly. Chapter 495. The cyan light illuminated the surroundings, rendering the surroundings cyan. Yu Qianzhou wielded his broadsword like a windmill, while Chu Dingfang struggled to move forward. Those who were clamoring in the imperial palace felt a chill down their spines in the face of the rolling heat wave. Fortunately, they did not act rashly. It seemed that even if more than 300 people attacked Yu Qianzhou at the same time, they would not be able to get close to him. How dare they provoke him? Thinking about it, Ding Wei died unjustly. He fought with an opponent he could not defeat, but he died without leaving a corpse. Wen Rui looked at the brilliant cyan flame and said to Nongzhu, "Sir, I heard that Yu Qianzhou has a famous incantation in the cultivation world of Huaxia called Star Flame Incantation. Is it this incantation?" Nongzhu chuckled and replied, Probably. Furong and Wen Bai, who were standing aside, stared at her intently. The surrounding spectators remained silent. Two old men in the crowd frowned deeply. One of them was dressed in black and the other in purple. After exchanging glances, the black-robed old man transmitted his voice, brother did you notice? Chu Dingfang seems to be a little off. Yes, he seems to be in a trance. The purple-robed elder nodded and replied, he seems to be bewitched by something. Let me have a try. The black-robed elder gathered his chi and shouted to Chu Dingfang with his sound-transmitting stick, Brother Chu, wake up. Chu Dingfang, whose dodging speed was getting slower and slower, felt his eardrums buzzing. His whole body shook, and his eyes flashed. Then he disappeared from the gap between the shadows of the broadswords. Nongzhu, who was watching the battle, narrowed his eyes and quickly glanced at the crowd. From Chu Dingfang's change, he knew that someone had secretly helped him. Wenrui also frowned and looked around. In the cultivation world, there were rules in a duel. As long as one did not admit defeat or quit, others could not intervene. Such behavior was the most abominable. Once the rules were broken, someone had to uphold them. Everything was like this. Nothing could be accomplished without rules. Yu Qianqiu naturally sensed that something was amiss. He was slightly startled, and the hundreds of flying swords behind him rushed forward to cover their retreat. He quickly jumped onto a flying sword and dove back into the sea of fire. An angry scolding came from the sea of green flames, shut your grandma's mouth. Which son of AB*** TCH interfered in the dark? Stand out if you have the guts. Just as he was about to succeed, someone suddenly interfered and ruined his plans. It would be strange if he wasn't angry. The purple-robed old man in the crowd frowned and said via voice transmission, Brother Guan, aren't you going a little too far by breaking the rules? The black-robed old man replied calmly, rules depend on who you're talking to. This kid is from the Chinese cultivation world, so he's our enemy. There's no need to talk about rules with him. Everyone should be punished. The onlookers also had some clues. With Yu Qianqiu's voice, everyone immediately understood that someone had interfered in the dark. Everyone was shaking their heads and searching. At least one thing was certain. The person who could transmit the voice must have cultivation above the crossing calamity stage. Therefore, everyone's eyes fell on the faces of the cultivators at the crossing calamity stage. However, transmission was elusive. It was difficult to find evidence except for the person involved. If the person involved didn't admit it, others couldn't do anything even if they guessed who it was. After all, there was no solid evidence. Nongzhu and Wenrui looked around. They looked at each other and shook their heads. There was nothing they could do. Suddenly, the two of them raised their heads and looked up at the sky. Their reaction attracted everyone's attention. They saw Chu Dingfang standing still in the air. Apparently, he was adjusting his body. Maybe his body was affected by something just now. After a long time, he slowly descended. A cold light flashed out of his storage bag. It flew around him for a few rounds and landed in his hand. It was a weapon that looked like a sword or a saber. It seemed like they were going to make a big move. The unusual atmosphere caused Yu Qianqiu to pop his head out of the sea of flames to look. When he discovered Chu Dingfang above him, he was just about to shrink back into the sea of flames when his gaze landed on Chu Dingfang's weapon. Ghost blade? In this moment of delay, Chu Dingfang's eyes narrowed and she immediately discovered him. He dashed toward Meng Qi. He shook the saber in his hand and a huge shadow dozens of meters long appeared. The huge saber shadow slashed down at the sea of fire. Damn! Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked. He quickly dove into the sea of fire to avoid it. The saber energy that came slashing down from the air stirred up a powerful gust of wind as it charged forward. With a loud boom, the sea of green flames that covered an area of several hundred square meters was struck to the bottom with one slash. Earth and rocks flew everywhere. The sea of fire that had been split into two was pushed to the sides by the strong wind. Why is the sky clear? Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the sea of fire, immediately revealed himself. At this moment, he was standing on the flying sword with a dumbfounded expression. He was holding a large saber as he stood there like a little wife who had been stripped naked and had suffered all kinds of grievances. There was a long and unforgettable trench on the ground. When the saber energy disappeared, Yu Qianqiu snapped out of his daze. He looked up and pointed his saber at Meng Qi. He shouted angrily, "Kill!" The sea of green fire that had been split into two instantly turned into two green fire dragons. They coiled in the air and pounced at Chu Dingfang with incomparable brilliance. Chu Dingfang smiled coldly. He quickly rose 100 meters into the air. He shook the saber in his hand and a huge energy shadow appeared again. He moved his wrist quickly. In an instant, he stirred up a strong wind. The two fire dragons that were pouncing at him immediately lost their momentum. They spun rapidly in the strong wind and merged into a pillar of fire in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu immediately sensed that blue fire was no longer under his control, so he gave up on resisting the powerful wind. His cultivation base was no match for blue fires. Forcibly resisting it would only result in him getting injured. Watch how I extinguish this pile of demonic fire of yours. Chu Dingfang laughed coldly in the air. Then, he flew straight up into the sky. The huge saber energy in his hand moved continuously and formed a strong suction force. He pulled the pillar of fire into the sky. Based on his actions, it seemed like he wanted to draw the green fire into the sky and then disperse it in the air. He did not want to give Yu Qianqiu a chance to retract it. A toad yawning. How arrogant! Yu Qianqiu spat. Although he could not fight his opponent head-on with his cultivation base, his opponent's cultivation base was not strong enough to seal everything. His ability to summon the fire element was not to be trifled with. Even if he could not control it, he could still retract it. He swung his saber diagonally and steadied himself on the flying sword. He raised his palm and shouted, "Come back!" A line of fire flowed out from the bottom of the rising fire dragon. The terminal was connected to Yu Qianqiu's palm. The moment the green fire touched his palm, it retracted even faster. Chu Dingfang was still flying up. In the end, he drew a green line of fire between the sky and the earth. Fortunately, it was not nighttime. Otherwise, even the commoners of Deyang City would be able to see it. Chu Dingfang looked a little strange. It was impossible for him to lose to a nascent soul cultivator with his cultivation base at the end of the tribulation passing stage. The huge saber energy turned into a shadow. Even the people on the ground a few hundred meters below reacted. Their clothes and hair were all sucked up. They had to circulate their energy to suppress it. However, this place was formed by the mountain peak that Yin Baikong had destroyed. The new layer of soil on the surface was soft. Immediately, the yellow soil flew up into the air, along with the withered grass and rotten branches of the surrounding mountains. The place immediately turned into a yellow haze. It covered the sky and the earth, making it impossible to see anything. Although the commotion was not small, it could not stop the green fire from flowing out of the eye of the storm. Like an overturned hourglass, it poured down in torrents. Yu Qianqiu extinguished the last wisp of azure flame. He couldn't see where the person above it was. He flung his sleeve, and a steady stream of azure light flashed out. Thousands of flying swords danced in the air. With a point of his finger, the thousands of flying swords exploded and shot into the sky. He rode his sword to the side and flew into the sky from the dusky haze. Chu Dingfang made her last effort, but her words still became a joke. She couldn't help but be angry out of shame. He put away his saber and looked down. It was a yellow haze. He could not see what was below him from the sky. He reckoned that the people below him could not see what was above him. Just as he was about to rush down, he heard an urgent whistling sound. Green lights flashed everywhere in the yellow haze. A group of flying swords randomly shot towards him without a target. The saber energy in his hand rose again. With a few casual swings, he knocked away dozens of flying swords that were shooting towards him. However, it was this collision that immediately disturbed the other flying swords. The thousands of flying swords seemed to have gone berserk. They all turned and shot towards him in a frenzy. Chu Dingfang snorted coldly and disdainfully. His target was Yu Qianqiu. He teleported and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already on the ground. He looked around but did not see Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that many people were looking up at the sky, he immediately understood that the fellow had gone up. With a swoosh, he shot up into the sky again. When he was in the sky, he realized that he had created a big problem for himself. It was difficult to see people clearly in the yellow haze. He had to be on guard against that fellow's sneak attacks. Huh! Chu Dingfang suddenly realized that something was wrong. The earthy smell was getting lighter. The yellow haze was getting whiter and seemed to be getting thicker. The scene of the 11 people fighting flashed in his mind. He was shocked and knew that this was not good. He quickly swept his divine sense around, searching for Yu Qianqiu's position. Suddenly, he found a big black saber floating in the haze. It seemed to be the saber that Yu Qianqiu used. Chu Dingfang's heart was beating wildly. The power of this saber was too strong. It broke through his aura shield like a paper knife. It was as easy as blowing off dust. This was in the hands of that fellow. If it fell into his hands, with his cultivation, he was afraid that among the cultivators in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, no one would be a match for him. Although he knew that it might be a trap, he could not help but release his divine sense to investigate. The key was that the temptation of this saber was too great. He thought, if I don't go over, what can he do to me? His divine sense touched the body of the saber. Before it went deep, he felt a strange and majestic aura. It contained an unknown and mysterious power. Just by touching it with his divine sense, he felt a lingering fear in his heart. Chapter 496. The spectators below also noticed something was wrong from the gradually fading yellow dust. There was another cloud in the sky, motionless. The cloud was exactly the same as the previous battle, and it immediately gave everyone a strange feeling. Could Chu Dingfang be inside? The crowd could not help but look at each other. Especially the black-robed elder and the purple-robed elder, they already felt something was wrong. However, the cloud was still peaceful and quiet, without any reaction. Would that guy play the same trick again? Nongzhu pinched her chin and thought. Yu Qianqiu hid in a corner of the cloud, sensing the movement inside. Seeing that Chu Dingfang had fallen into his trap, he sneered. In order to prevent the other party from escaping after discovering something was wrong, he deliberately offered the tempting big black saber, which made the other party salivate. Noticing that Chu Dingfang's divine awareness had touched the big black saber, he slowly stretched out his clenched fist and suddenly opened it. Chu Dingfang's divine awareness sensed the majestic power in the big black saber, hesitating whether to take it or not, but he was afraid of falling into a trap. After all, it was not so easy. After thinking about it, he decided not to rush. After he killed that guy, the saber would still be his. However, just when his divine awareness was about to leave the big black saber and continue to search for Yu Qianqiu, there was a sudden bang. The big black saber exploded in an instant, exploding into a raging black flame, instantly drowning his divine awareness in a black sea of fire. The pain that followed was like being cut by thousands of knives, appearing in every corner of his body in an instant. It was like countless sharp knives were cutting every piece of his skin and drilling into every bone. There seemed to be countless worms wriggling in his head, nibbling away at them. It was like his whole body was suffering in a fire, as if it was going to burn him alive. The pain was suffocating, but he was struggling in the endless sea of bitterness, never able to find the other side, and had to suffer like this. The heart-wrenching pain that he was unable to extricate himself from numbness occupied every single one of his nerves. The pain seeped into his bones and soul. Chu Dingfang hugged her head with her hands and curled into a ball. Her face was twisted to the extreme. She tore off her beard and hair with her hands and scratched her face with her nails. She didn't seem to know who she was and was in a state worse than death. F***ck me. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He did not expect the response to be so extraordinary. This guy's cultivation level was too high. He was afraid that ordinary methods would not work on him, so he purposely blew up the black knife condensed by the black fire and enlarged the fire to burn his mother's divine sense. He did not expect that it would burn a little too much. He appeared on his sword and charged over. With a wave of his hand, he collected the black flames cleanly. Chu Dingfang could no longer stay in the air. Her body swayed and fell down from the clouds. Yu Qianqiu quickly rushed over and grabbed the old man's storage pouch, lifting him up. The old man's twisted and struggling appearance was truly unbearable to look at. The old man couldn't even scream and could only howl. He raised one hand and a green flame appeared. He wanted to give him a quick death. However, after a slight pause, the green flame left a little green glow on her fingertips and cut the rope on the storage bag. Chu Dingfang fell down. I'll use you to test my absorbing star's great skill. Yu Qianqiu swung his palm at the falling person. White smoke rose from Chu Dingfang's body, and he instantly shriveled up like a skeleton. He floated down from the clouds. The people below had been paying attention to the sky above. When the explosion sounded, the clouds above their heads instantly darkened. No one knew what was going on. Nongzhu was the only one who thought of the word black fire. Then came a terrifying scream. The scream was even worse than the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. It was hard to imagine that it came from a human. Judging from the tone, it should be Chu Dingfang's voice. Another person followed in his footsteps, and it was an expert at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Everyone looked at each other, wondering what was wrong with the clouds. Whoosh! Chu Dingfang's katana was the first to fall. It directly stabbed into the ground, proving that the unfortunate person they had guessed was right. Then, everyone saw a body fall. The strange thing was that the speed of the body's fall was not that fast, and it seemed to be floating. Pow! Chu Dingfang, who was curled up, squatted steadily on the soft ground. Not dead? Everyone was stunned. Suddenly, there was a crisp, hua sound. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Chu Dingfang was instantly torn into pieces after a short pause. Her entire body shattered into a pile and collapsed on the ground. His whole body collapsed into pieces and powder, hiss. Many people in the crowd gasped in disbelief. What kind of death was this? In fact, the moment Chu Dingfang's body broke into pieces, the person who was facing him saw the unforgettable scene. His face was dry and shriveled, and he was just skin and bones. Even his eyeballs had dried up to the size of 2 soybeans, hanging outside his eye sockets. The inside of his eye sockets were dark. The skin and flesh on his face shrunk together, and his white teeth had also decayed into a withered yellow color. It was as if Chu Dingfang had lived for thousands of years, and he was a dried corpse from thousands of years in the future. If not for the movement above and the robe on his body, who would believe that he was Chu Dingfang? Unfortunately, the direction he was facing was where Hibiscus was. Furong retched and almost threw up. Fortunately, the dried corpse collapsed in the blink of an eye. Otherwise, Furong would have vomited if she had looked at it for a while longer. Wen Rui was also shocked. This kind of death was too strange. Nongzhu's pupils suddenly shrank. She immediately thought of the scene of Yu Qianqiu taking away the life of a flower with one palm strike that night. It had also withered in an instant. Although one was a flower and the other was a human, there was no doubt that both of them had the same experience. This guy finally used this skill on a human. Nongzhu remembered that Yu Qianqiu wanted to try this skill on her that night. If she had agreed at that time, but could not resist it, she would have ended up like the ugly rotten corpse in front of her. She shuddered at the thought that she might become like this. The more she thought about it, the more scared she became. She could not help but curse in her heart, bastard, he doesn't even know the importance of something he has just learned, and he wants to use me to practice. I don't know what old Bai taught him. Of all the things he could have taught me, why did he teach me such a scary thing? Nongzhu decided on the spot that she would leave this place as soon as this thing was over. She could not help but talk back to that guy. If she made him angry one day, he would do the same to her. What if she could not resist it? Wen Rui took a deep breath, turned his head, and asked, Mister, I've never seen or heard of the magic arts used by Yu Qianqiu. Can you tell me where he came from? In his impression, Mr. Nomju had the widest circle of friends in the world. Since he was tolerant of Yu Qianzhou and everything, he must know his background. Nomju paused and shook her head slightly. She replied, "You'd better not know. Anyway, his background is very powerful. Your Wen family can't afford to offend him." "Is he Bai Changchun's disciple?" Wen Rui was surprised. The old ancestor of the Wen family, Wen Lanfeng, was the second master in the world, second only to Bai Changchun. If the Wen family couldn't afford to offend him, who else could it be except Bai Changchun? Nomju was stunned. He had guessed it correctly. But what Wen Rui said next made her even more stunned. Wen Rui shook his head and denied himself. "I don't think so. I've seen Bai Changchun's skills. Even if it's unpredictable and unconstrained, it's completely dignified and arrogant. It's not similar to Yu Qianzhou's skills at all. A master and disciple wouldn't be like this. And Yu Qianzhou's skill is full of evil qi. It's not like he's Bai Changchun's disciple." Nomju was speechless. "How do you know it's not Bai Changchun who taught him?" "I heard the skill from Bai Changchun and witnessed the process of understanding it. In short, if your Wen family can help him in the future, try your best to help him. It won't do any harm to your family." Nomju gave an ambiguous answer. She didn't want to make another enemy for Yu Qianzhou in the world. "Thank you for reminding me, sir." Wen Rui nodded slightly and sighed. It's said that all the skills in the world originate from Huaxia. Yu Qianzhou is from Huaxia and his skills are really magical. It seems that it's a good thing that our Wen family didn't intervene in the fight between the two sides. The vast Huaxia is really full of hidden talents. It's not as simple as it looks. I'm afraid that things won't go so smoothly for the other countries. Nomju glanced at him and was speechless. She thought, "You're really good at making connections." Howl. A clear roar resounded from the 9 heavens, as if it was announcing its victory. Yu Qianzhou rode his sword and flew straight down. After landing, he glanced at Chu Dingfang's remains and was quite satisfied with the power of his water conjuration. This was the first time he killed a cultivator in the last phase of the heavens test. It was really memorable. Who else is not convinced? This short sentence revealed an intense self-confidence. Yu Qianzhou coldly surveyed his surroundings, exuding a disdainful aura. He felt that he hadn't been like this for a long time. He had been a gangster for a long time. The feeling of being a gang leader that he had forgotten for a long time had returned. Nomju smiled bitterly. "You killed Bing Qingzi's disciple, Yin Baikang's disciple, and now you killed Hu Changshou's disciple. You've offended all of them. Among the top 10 cultivators in the last phase of the spirit-severing realm, you've already offended 3 of them. Good luck." The black-robed elder in the crowd transmitted his voice to the purple-robed elder beside him. "Brother Yu, this kid's cultivation is still low, but he has already shown his outstanding talent. He will definitely become a disaster in the future. Let's attack together and take this opportunity to get rid of this kid." The purple-robed elder frowned and replied, "Brother Guan, you and I are 2 cultivators in the last phase of the heavens test against a nascent soul cultivator. Won't we be a joke in front of so many people?" "That's not the way to put it." The black-robed elder said in a deep voice, "A kid from Huaxia challenged the cultivators of the other countries. If we let him leave alive, and none of us can stop him, that would be the biggest joke in the world. What's more, he said it himself. It doesn't matter if we all attack together. It's not against the rules if it's just us." Chapter 497. "Brother Guan, didn't you notice that this kid's magic art is a bit strange? Do you really think we can kill him?" The purple-robed elder voiced out his concern. The black-robed elder laughed and said, "Brother Yu, you worry too much. Did you notice that this kid's secret lies in the mist? As long as we don't go into the mist, he can't do anything to us. Or rather, kill him before he can release the cloud and mist. Heh heh. If we fight together, I don't think that kid will have the chance to release the mist. Brother Yu, after we kill that kid, we can split the things in the storage pouch, including the 2 sabers. What do you think? The purple-robed elder was hesitant at first, but when he heard about the 2 sabers, he frowned and nodded slightly. Maybe we can try. Yu Qianshou thought that the battle just now was enough to shock this group of people. Seeing that no one answered him, he sneered and was about to pick up the storage pouch. Unexpectedly, before he could reach Wenrui, 2 storage pouches flew through the air and smashed in front of him. Looking back, an old man in a black robe and an old man in a purple robe appeared out of nowhere. The former sneered and said, "You don't need to pick up the things, we will pick them up for you later." His tone was full of confidence. The onlookers were in an uproar again. When they saw that Yu Qianshou could kill Chu Dingfang, who was in the final stage of the Crossing Heavens test, they were really shocked. They didn't expect that an original infant stage cultivator could do this. They were already prepared to lose face. The sudden appearance of the 2 people gave everyone hope. Many people knew them, and the appearance of these 2 cultivators in the final stage of the Crossing Heavens test surprised everyone. Originally, they thought that people in the final stage of the Crossing Heavens test would care about their reputation, so it was impossible for more than 2 people to fight a cultivator in the original infant stage at the same time. However, a cultivator in the final stage of the Crossing Heavens test might not be able to defeat Yu Qianshou. Just when they were about to accept this unacceptable fact, something unexpected happened. At this moment, no one dared to look down on the behavior of these 2 people, because it concerned everyone's reputation. However, some people didn't like it. Nongzhu snorted coldly and said to Wenrui, "Some people are really shameless." Wenrui smiled but did not say anything. Yu Qianshou was the one who boasted. Since he dared to say it, he must have the courage to face reality. He could not blame others. Yu Qianshou narrowed his eyes and looked at the 2 of them. Since they dared to say such words at this time, they must be cultivators at the end of the tribulation stage. As expected, Nongzhu's voice rang in his ears, "Don't be careless." The one in black is Guan Zhongkai, the disciple of Yin Baikong's eldest disciple, Sikong Ju. The one in purple is Yu Landu, the disciple of Shengguan Taiping, a middle-stage deity transformation cultivator from the Purple Thistle Kingdom. Both of them are at the late stage of the crossing tribulation. Have the 2 of you decided to come at me together? Yu Qianshou asked sarcastically. Yu Landu's expression was slightly awkward. On the contrary, Guan Zhongkai's expression was calm as he sneered, "If you are afraid, it is not too late. Kneel and beg for mercy. Leave behind the things in your storage pouch and I will spare your life. If you want the things, you have to have the ability to take them." As soon as Yu Qianshou finished speaking, he immediately threw out a flying sword and quickly flew into the sky. These 2 clearly knew that he had some tricks up his sleeves. Since they still dared to come at him, they must have the confidence to deal with him. He did not dare to underestimate them now. "Hee hee." Guan Zhongkai sneered. A flying sword flashed out of his storage pouch and directly chased after Yu Qianshou in the sky. He himself teleported and disappeared. Without any hesitation, Yu Lan soared into the sky at an extremely fast speed with a whoosh sound. Everyone's gaze was attracted to them. Furong had also roughly guessed the cultivation of these 2. She tightly shut her mouth and did not say a word. She was silently worried. She was afraid that if she made a sound, it would affect Yu Qianshou. Hearing the whistling sound coming from below, Yu Qianshou glanced at it. He rode his sword and dodged horizontally, brushing past the flying sword. A strong gust of wind almost blew him off his sword. This was the result of a huge difference in cultivation. Just as he dodged the attack with lingering fear, he realized that in the direction he was dodging, the black-robed Guan Zhongkai had been waiting for a long time in front of him. He sneered and casually snatched the flying sword that was flying towards him. He shook out a huge sword aura and slashed down. F***ck. Yu Qianshou was startled and quickly dodged again. The transparent sword aura brushed past him again. But no matter which direction he dodged, Guan Zhongkai was able to block in front of him in time. He skillfully and easily chased after him with his sword. Every time, he was frightened and narrowly dodged. In the eyes of others, Guan Zhongkai was like a cat toying with a mouse. His opponent didn't even give him a chance to release the fog. He could only release a little for a short period of time, but it didn't have any effect. Without saying anything further, green light flashed on his two sleeves. Instantly, a sky full of flying swords circled around him to protect him. At the same time, over 100 swords attacked Guan Zhongkai in a roundabout way, hoping to buy him some time to breathe. And indeed, it had some effect. Guan Zhongkai was somewhat apprehensive as he swung his sword like he was swatting flies. After all, 3 nascent soul stage cultivators had been mysteriously killed after being surrounded by these green flying swords. Over 100 flying swords were constantly knocked away, but they also continued to entangle him. They were just like flies. Whoosh! Suddenly, another whistling sound came from below. When he glanced over, he was startled again. It was Yulan who saw him start to counterattack. She immediately raised her palms and pushed out a basin-sized ball of light that shot towards him. F***CK. Kamehameha Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened and he hurriedly rode his sword to dodge. Although he managed to dodge, the flying swords behind him that he didn't dodge in time were damaged. Bang! Amidst a violent explosion, the densely packed flying swords that were circling in the air were blown into pieces and scattered in all directions. The powerful shockwave was like a heavy hammer that fiercely smashed into his back. The shockwave directly knocked him off the flying sword he was standing on. Yu Qianqiu felt his vision turn black. He felt a sweetness in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. In just a few moments, he was already injured. This was the result of a huge difference in cultivation. His opponent had come prepared. With his nascent soul stage cultivation, he was simply no match for his opponent. He was easily dealt with. Hibiscus, who was below, covered her mouth with her hand, and tears instantly flowed out. Nongzhu's expression was grim, but she still sent a voice transmission to Hibiscus, comforting her, "Girl, don't worry. This kid won't die so easily." Wen Rui's expression was also somewhat grave. If this Yu Qianqiu really did have a powerful background, and if he were to attract an extraordinary person, then this matter would become even more serious. The cultivators from the various countries who were watching the battle erupted in cheers. They had finally taught this arrogant fellow a lesson. In a moment of absent-mindedness, the flying swords immediately lost control and fell one after another. Guan Zhongkai got rid of the fly's harassment. His expression darkened and the sword in his hand floated up. He pushed it out with his palm and it shot towards the falling Yu Qianqiu like a bolt of lightning. Yulan Do teleported to the other side and pushed out another ball of light. Together with Guan Zhongkai's flying swords, they launched a pincer attack. From the looks of it, the two of them wanted to finish the battle in one go. Yu Qianqiu spat out a mouthful of blood. He felt relieved and his vision became clear again. He quickly glanced at them and a burst of uncontrollable anger burst out. "How dare you hit me?" "Ah!" Yu Qianqiu looked up to the sky and roared. All the green fire elements stored in his body burst out in an instant. Not a single bit was left, surging green flames spewed out like an explosion. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Do's pupils shrank rapidly. The flames hadn't arrived yet, but the unparalleled heat had arrived first. The two of them suddenly felt like they had poked a hornet's nest. Without saying a word, they quickly turned around and displayed the fastest flying speed in their lives. However, they still felt that it wasn't enough. They teleported again and again, exhausting a lot of their cultivation to escape. Previously, Chu Dingfang couldn't even withstand the high temperature of the green flames when he hid inside his protective aura and had to escape. The two of them had about the same cultivation as him. They could tell at a glance that it was powerful. There was no need to try and escape. At first, the two of them thought that the green flames hidden in Yu Qianqiu's body were the same ones that he had released earlier. It wouldn't be difficult to avoid them. Who knew that there were so many of them? Was he still human? How could a human hide so many flames? The two of them even had the urge to curse. How did they meet such a monster? They were still fighting to their heart's content earlier and wanted to kill that brat. How did they end up being forced to escape in the blink of an eye? If they had known earlier, they wouldn't have joined in the fun. When the ball of light released by Yulan was still 100 meters away from Yu Qianqiu, it was directly roasted by the green flames and exploded with a loud explosion. However, it only set off a ripple in the sea of flames. It didn't affect Yu Qianqiu at all. Needless to say, the flying swords released by Guan Zhongkai were melted into liquid in the sea of flames. Guan Zhongkai, who had a connection with the flying swords, felt his heart ache. That flying sword was a high-grade transcendent artifact given to him by his master. The thousands of green flying swords that were originally scattered flew up into the sky and merged into the sea of flames. The terrifying sea of flames that filled the sky swelled up again. After quickly escaping for several kilometers, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan finally got rid of the pursuit of the green flames. The two of them stood on opposite ends of the sea of flames. They didn't look at each other, but their mood was completely the same. The two of them almost collapsed from exhaustion. With their cultivation, they could only teleport 500 or 600 meters at most. Teleportation consumed too much of their cultivation. It was not a technique that could be used multiple times. They had used teleportation more than 10 times. How could they bear it? It was really too tiring. When the two of them turned around to look, their intestines almost turned green with regret. They could have escaped to the sky or to the ground, but this fire chased them horizontally. However, they didn't dare to be sure. What if the other party could control the flames to chase them? This was very possible. An unforgettable scene appeared in the sky. Green flames. Green flames filled the sky, covering the sun. The sky within a radius of several kilometers was completely covered by the green flames. The dazzling green light illuminated the sky. Even Dayang City, which was several kilometers away, was alarmed. Some of the commoners climbed onto the roofs of tall buildings. Many of them squeezed out of the city to see the spectacle in the distant sky, below the green flames. Among the spectators, those with low cultivation could no longer bear it. Although the green flames above and below were separated by more than 100 meters, if they continued to roast like this, how could they bear it? You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.